Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If the clerk would please call the roll of the members.
Monica Duran.
Here.
Denise Hoppy.
Present.
Zachary Urban.
Present.
Tim Fitzgerald.
Here.
Christy Davis.
Here.
George Pond.
Present.
Leah Dozman.
Here.
Larry Matthews.
Here. Thank you. Councilors, in your packet, you have for approval the council minutes of September 24th, 2018 and October 22nd, 2018, and the study session notes of November 5th, 2018. Are there any corrections or modifications to these documents? And I only see one for our clerk to make a record of on the City Council minutes of October 22nd, 2018. I was absent and should be noted on the minutes as such. We have a couple of proclamations this evening, so I'm going to move to the podium. Our first proclamation concerns Small Business Saturday, which was last Saturday, November 24th, but I hope will be a continuing cause in our city. Whereas the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado celebrates our local and small businesses and contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 30.2 million small businesses in the United States, representing 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States, and are responsible for 65.9% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2017. And whereas small businesses employ 47.5% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, and whereas 90% of consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community, and whereas 89% of consumers who are aware of Small Business Saturday said the day encourages them to shop small all year long, and whereas 73% of consumers who reportedly shopped small and independently owned retailers and restaurants on Small Business Saturday did so with friends or family, and whereas the most important reason, or the most reported reason, for consumers aware of Small Business Saturday, a day to shop and dine at independently owned businesses, was to support their community, and whereas Wheat Ridge, Colorado supports our local small businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, I, Bud Starker, Mayor of the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, do hereby proclaim November 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday, and urge residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. And for our next proclamation, I'd like to invite Andy McKean to join me at the podium. For our next proclamation, which is Bill of Rights Day, and Mr. McKean brought this forward for my attention. On December 15, 2018, whereas on December 15, 1791, the Founding Fathers of the United States of America ratified a document that contained amendments to the Constitution that would become the cornerstones of the freedoms, privileges, and rights we enjoy today. And whereas those first 10 amendments of the Constitution of the United States of America would become known as the Bill of Rights. And whereas these amendments limit the power of the federal government and guarantee each citizen life, liberty, justice, property, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas in 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared December 15th to be Bill of Rights Day to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the ratification of the Bill of Rights. And whereas on this anniversary of the ratification of the Bill of Rights, all people of this country continue to live and prosper because of the freedoms and privileges ensured by this document. Now therefore I, Bud Starker, Mayor of the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, do hereby proclaim December 15th, 2018 as Bill of Rights Day in honor of the ratification of that important document. Encourage all Wheat Ridge residents to reflect on the significance and important event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to citizens' right to speak. And citizens who wish may speak on any matter not on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes. And they may have signed the public comment roster. So when I read your name, if you would please come to the podium and adjust the mic so that you can speak into it clearly. We want to capture all of the audio and visuals in this setting. And give us your name and spell your last name if you would, and give us your address. And our first speaker tonight is former Mayor Jerry Ditullio, and Rachel Holteen is on deck.
Good evening, everybody. Jerry Ditullio, 7500 West 29th Avenue. I just wanted to read this letter into the record tonight, and it's with bittersweet. Dear Mayor Starker and members of City Council, as you know, I've been elected to the office of Jefferson County Treasurer. I will take the oath of office on January 8th, 2019 and begin work. Accordingly, and pursuant to Wheat Ridge Charter Section 3.11, I hereby tender my resignation from the office of Wheat Ridge Treasurer effective midnight on January 7th, 2019. I have chosen this date so I can complete the December 2018 financial reporting. I'm honored to have served the Wheat Ridge community as mayor, a District 1 council member, and city treasurer for the past 23 years. As your treasurer since 2015, I'm proud of the fiscal transparency and accomplishments my office has made and during this time. I specifically want to let you know that I will be making myself available after January 7th to assist the newly appointed treasurer with the transition to his or her new duties. I encourage City Council to appoint a proactive and innovative city treasurer as soon as possible and not delay until the 2019 election. While the city charter is silent on the timing when a new treasurer is appointed, it is my opinion that delaying the appointment through the 2019 election violates the spirit and intent of the city charter and the will of the voters in having an elected treasurer as a check and balance at City Hall. Sincerely, Jerry Ditullio, City Treasurer. I also want to let everybody know that my last day at Jefferson County School District, Wheat Ridge High School, is December 31st, since this job is a full-time job at the county for the next 4 years. So thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Ditullio. Our next speaker is Rachel Holteen and Sonny Garcia on deck.
Good evening, Mayor Starker and Council. My name is Rachel Holteen, Hultin, and I live at 4690 Balsam Street. It's hard to follow that act. Jerry, thank you for all your years of service to our city. That's exciting. I'm here tonight because the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Committee is hosting a community open house on Wednesday, December 12th from 5 to 5:30 to 8. I should probably get this right. It's from 5:30 to 8 p.m. at the Wheat Ridge Recreation Center. This is a really important event, and we want to see, we'd love to see all 30,000 people from Wheat Ridge come through the doors during those 2.5 hours. But at the very least, we really hope that we get to see council come through, as well as many community members as you're able to invite and encourage to attend. This is an opportunity to understand more about what the neighborhood revitalization strategy has been, what the process is that the committee is undertaking in partnership with the city and the citizens, and also to understand what is happening next. And there's always opportunities at these to learn more and to share more input. We're going to have several stations where we'll be soliciting more feedback and more points of just perspective from our community. So on that note, I actually really would like to thank Councilman Urban for sending out the postcard for this last round of community engagement. I know at the meetings I went to, I think almost every one of those meetings, there was at least one, if not several people who received that postcard. So you can look to Zach for some great communication tips. And please invite your lists of people, and I know the city's doing a good job. So that is Wednesday, December 12th. From 5:30 to 8 p.m. at the Recreation Center, and you can come by anytime during that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to our next speaker, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we're speaking now on items that are not on the agenda. So if there's an item on the agenda, which is, items sort of 1 through 10 probably, we have sign-up sheets in the back. So this is for items that are not on the agenda. Thank you. And our next speaker is Sonny Garcia and Jennifer Yates on deck.
Hi, City Council. Hi, Mayor, everybody. Sonny Garcia, 4304 Hoyt Street. I want to second what Rachel said about the NRS meeting. Anybody who can make it, that would be great. The more showing we have, the better, obviously. I'm actually here to talk really quickly. I wanted to thank Mayor Starker. I was able to attend the Arvada Chamber Mayor's Breakfast, the annual breakfast, and I was really impressed to learn about the collaboration between all of the mayors of our neighboring cities. Pretty complex issues that they're trying to deal with, from our homeless population to attainable housing. And it was just a fun event, and they could all have second job as comedians because it was a really lovely breakfast. And I just want to say thank you. And anybody who has a chance to go to any of the Arvada Chamber events or any events like that, you should. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Yates, and Sam Soterer. Kind of butchered that one. Is on deck.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Yates. I live at 3700 Miller Street. I'm going to read just a couple of things from this real quick. This is from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Colorado youth are vaping nicotine at twice the national average. More than 90% of vaping products, when tested, were found to contain nicotine. Nicotine has a negative effect on the adolescent brain development, causing lasting cognitive and behavioral impairments, including effects on working memory and attention, which is a problem when they're in school. A study of 12th grade students who had never smoked a cigarette found that those who reported recent vaping were nearly 5 times more likely to take up smoking 1 year later. Vaping is a real problem in our school. This is a little vaping device, and this is juice that goes with it. This does not create the big plume of smoke that most people associate with vaping. It's very inconspicuous. There's very little smell. This, so small I can't find it. This is a Juul. This is the real problem in our school. This is so small that kids can do this in class, and they do it in class all day long. Teachers know what's going on, but it's really hard to do anything about it because they're so small and so easy to hide. One of these pods has as much nicotine in it as 2 packs of cigarettes. That's a lot of nicotine. The legal age needs to be 21. At 18, it's still available in our schools. The older students purchase it and then resell it to the younger students. There is a whole underground black market going on in our schools. I believe part of your job here is to safeguard our city and our communities for the future. Please support changing the legal age to buy, sell, or use these products to 21 and requiring retail and licensing and/or permits to sell any nicotine products. Please protect our youth and help our teachers teach. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Sotier and Douglas Linton on deck.
Thank you, Mayor Starker and City Council, for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Sam Sotiros. I know it's a tough one. Sotiros, and I'm here tonight to speak on a more uplifting note. Sorry to hear about that's really frightening, what we just heard. But I'm here on behalf of Wild Bird Rescue and Rehab. We submitted a plan to build a rehab facility, about 4 years ago on some land that we have on 44th Avenue. And so I just wanted to update you on what's happening, what's going on with us. We want to try to become part of the community, and really form a good partnership with you guys. I'm actually the acting, or the board president right now, and acting executive director of the organization. We kind of reopened about a year ago, and we have a facility at the end of 44th, about a mile from the property that we have. And in the past year, we've treated about 1,000 birds. Most of them, they're all wild birds. Most have been kidnapped, orphaned, injured, and what we're shooting for is to try to get back real soon to what we used to do back in 2014 and earlier, when we were located in Denver, and we were treating roughly 3,000 birds a year. So right now we're very limited, on the space that we have. We're indoors, so all we can really handle are small birds, and anything larger like waterfowl, large birds that are like ravens and crows, we have to pass on to some of these other rehabbers, mostly outside the metro area. There's Birds of Prey up in Broomfield that handles birds of prey, of course, but they also handle some large waterfowl and ravens and crows. And then there's Greenwood Wildlife Rehabilitation up in Boulder. They're actually out just a little outside of Lyons. They handle overflow too, but their primary emphasis is on small mammals. But we're strictly birds, and at this point, there's nothing else in the metro area. There's a small rehabber located in Parker, and so other than us and the Birds of Prey Foundation up in Broomfield, nobody else in the metro area is really, no large facility is handling birds like we do. So I just wanted to let you know that we have submitted, I'm going to meet with actually the planning department next week, and to try to see about opening up a couple of aviaries on the land that we have. It's not part of the original site plan, and with that, we'd be able to try to fully handle all the birds here in the metro area, like large waterfowl, crows, ravens, magpies. But anyway, I just want to let you know what we're doing, and we're looking forward to working with you guys. We'll be hiring people, especially volunteers that we need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, also, I've got some brochures here. Do you want me to leave them with
If
you?
you'd leave those with the clerk. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Douglas Linden and Ryan Mitchell on deck.
Douglas Linder, 3610 Johnson Street. Mr. Mayor, council members, and everyone, hello. So speaking on behalf of Better Wheat Ridge, large and growing community of concerned citizens and active volunteers. Hey, Monica, would like you to stick around a while. Why don't you try and juggle both jobs for a while? It's kind of like, you only get this shot once in your lifetime. Stick around for maybe another year or so and see what you do, or maybe your first heart attack, you could retire from here. But I'm speaking for us to say, hey, why don't you try and juggle them both? And believe me, any conflict of interest that they think about is nothing compared to what's going on way above our heads in the White House and all that stuff. So, you can stick around a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ryan Mitchell, next speaker, and Becky Lewthwaite on deck.
I'm Ryan Mitchell, 3955 Zephyr Drive. So my topic's on the agenda, so I thought since I'd signed up, I'd just say thank you to Jerry and Monica and congratulations. I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Becky Lewthwaite and John Clark on deck.
Becky Lewthwaite, Lewthwaite, 9860 West 37th Avenue. And I can't follow up with you, Doug. That was great. And again, this is directed to Ms. Duran. But I represent a very active community with many volunteers. We just heard about this meeting tonight. And had we had more notice, I'm sure we would have added to the population here. But I speak for the community and ask Ms. Duran to fulfill her commitment on the Wheat Ridge City Council, which is not diabolically opposed to her being elected to the State House of Representatives. So thank you very much for what you've done up to this point. We look forward to working with you even longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Clark.
And I don't get a runner-up. So my name is John Clark. I live at 4665 Swadley Street. Concerning Monica and Jerry, I think I spoke to both of them personally, so I appreciate everything they've done. Full disclosure, I've lived in Wheat Ridge for over 45 years. I am a homeowner. My family and I have rentals in Wheat Ridge, Arvada, and Lakewood, and I currently live in District 4. So it appears to me in the years, looks like we have city leaders, officials, planners, and developers that haven't lived in Wheat Ridge, don't currently live in Wheat Ridge, never will live in Wheat Ridge, and they really don't seem to give two shits about how the city's developed. Hell, we even had a leader of an organization that pushed a lot of bad ideas in Wheat Ridge. She came to Wheat Ridge, touted that Wheat Ridge needs this and that, needs this, needs that, helped turn Wheat Ridge into the hellhole that it's becoming, and then turn around and run off to Denver. After she finished her damage here, the city actually gave her an award. So at least we know the direction the city wants to go. So the citizens of Wheat Ridge are being told, we don't care. The city does not care. Tonight's agenda talks about a property over at 4440 Tabor. And I'm not going to talk to that because it's on the agenda. But I will say that 6 months ago, I went to a neighborhood meeting, a planning meeting, and 2 council meetings on a zone change right across the street from 4440 Tabor. Spoke at every one of those meetings, trying to change that zoning from Ag 1 to multi-use. And at every one of those meetings, I spoke that if you guys give that zoning to that piece of property, that 1 acre, the one across the street will be next. And sure as shit, here it is 6 months later. Here we are. We're talking about 4440 Tabor. So more residential, we're going to pack more residential in there. But again, the city, we don't care. Last week, there was over an hour-long discussion about 52nd, Ridge Road, Ward, Sims. Ms. Byer even came in and had legal papers from 1998, signed by the city of Wheat Ridge. Nobody cares. At if you watch the video at about minute 40 to 46, there's a lot of talk about a house that sits at the southeast corner of 52nd and Tabor. The actual address is 5190 Tabor. And just so everybody's aware, that property is owned by my family. I heard a lot of discussion about just wiping it out. My niece currently lives in that property. She has absolutely no intention of moving, just so everybody's aware. So when I hear the city council is currently investigating property lines, and that's the quote, investigating property lines, I get a little concerned because I keep hearing from the city that we don't care. But that's my house, that's my family's house. You guys don't care. So I was going to go to the planning meeting last week and speak about 4440 Tabor.
Mr. Clark, I believe your 3 minutes just about up.
Just about. I got 10 seconds. So you got townhomes going into there, and we don't care. So I'm not even going to speak about it tonight because I'm tired of hearing we don't care. You're going to do whatever you want. Thanks.
Thank you. That is all of the speakers that I have signed up to speak on citizens' right to speak. If there's anyone here that hasn't signed up but would still like to speak, you may do so at this time. Please come forward to the microphone.
My name is Henry Lewthwaite. It's Lewthwaite. I'd like to take this opportunity to let Monica Durant know how much we as a neighborhood appreciate her role in the city council and the fact that she understood our unique situation in our neighborhood this last summer. Monica, we feel that it's important for you to remain on the city council, not just for the sake of our neighborhood, but for the sake of the city. We are hoping that you are willing to reconsider staying on the council position, and at least until the end of your term, or maybe even longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight who would like to speak under public comment? Yes, ma'am, please come to the podium.
I can still speak on the item 10 as well, correct?
Yes, you may.
Okay. It just gives me a couple minutes to say something. My name's Elizabeth.
Please adjust the microphone so we can hear you.
My name's Elizabeth Grant, and I live at 3881 Estes. I was listening to the gentleman talking about the zonage at Tabor in back of Heine's Market, and I was saddened by the way he was talking and saying he's not even going to ask you to help him because he's given up. We don't want a city with little people, and we're all little people. All of us that aren't there are the little ones. We don't want us to give up. He represents so many people. We've got to stop and take stock. What's perhaps a remedy or a series of remedies? Maybe, Monica, you could think of what could be done. I know you, and I know a couple of others of you a little bit, but I got the flavor listening to some of the testimony about another item that's on the agenda, that you were saying you're so busy, just so busy. What, one more item that we're going to have to deal with? Let's have an administrative decision so we don't have to think about it, we're done, and we don't have to worry. And it's more time to get done the things that we already have on our plate. So I'm asking you to get a bigger plate so that you can deal with some of these things and take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. We are still under citizens' right to speak. This is public comment. Anyone can come and speak on any item that is not on the agenda. Is there anyone here in the audience who would like to come and speak under public comment? Okay, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, may I respond to the citizens' right to speak for just a second, please?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I understand where the last speaker was coming to, but I sincerely hope that this council and this body and this city at some point in time will improve its image to where people in the audience don't consider themselves the little people. We are hired by you. I don't consider myself a politician, never wanted to be. I'm a part-time, temporary employee of the city as hired directly by the people of the city. You're my boss. And I think an awful lot of other people up here agree to that concept. Please don't lose faith in us. And please, all of you little people, show up every day and show us just how big you are, because we will listen. And if we have this many people here every night, the people's will has a much better chance of being acted on here on the council. There's a lot of nights we have absolutely zero people out there in those chairs. And if you can't be here, watch it on TV. If you can't watch it live on TV, there's a video recording. But I urge each and every one of you to consider yourselves Paul Bunyan. I'm a Minnesota boy. And you're big people. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have approval. Are there any modifications to the agenda? Okay, we will move with the agenda. We will start with item number 1, our consent agenda. Ms. Duran, would you please introduce item number 1?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Consent agenda item A, motion to adopt the 2019 City Council meeting calendar. B, motion to approve payment to Kaiser Permanente for December 2018 membership billing in the amount of $184,418.66. Item C, motion to award a contract and approve sequential payments to independent roofing specialists, Commerce City, Colorado, in the amount of $115,154 for active adult center roof, HVAC repairs and replacement, and to approve a contingency amount of $11,515 for total amount not to exceed $126,669. D, motion to approve payment to Colorado State Bank and Trust for a bond principal and interest payment in the amount of $2,952,650 for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado Sales and Use Tax Revenue Bonds, Series 2017A.
Second.
Well, actually, I don't think we've gotten a motion. Let's go to, make a motion for those, please.
Okay. I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Mr. Irvin?
Sorry. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please poll the council on the consent agenda, item number 1? Thank you. Our next agenda item is a quasi-judicial public hearing, a required step to rezone property in our city. The outcome of this hearing will affect the parties involved and the community as a whole. The city councilors sit as jurors in this hearing. They have been cautioned to make their determination based on the testimony presented in tonight's public hearing. We may hear testimony from both sides on this issue, and each side deserves the consideration to be heard in a fair and impartial manner. Outbursts from the audience, whether applause, cheers, or jeers for one speaker or another, disrupt the proceedings and do not promote fairness. Please join me to make this a fair and impartial hearing. Please sit quietly and listen to the speakers without outbursts. Now, is there anyone here that doesn't think they can agree to those rules? Thank you so much. Mr. Matthews, would you please introduce item number 2?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill number 27-2018, an ordinance approving an amendment to the outline development plan for the Camelot Club Apartments planned residential development for property located at 4635 and 4665 Kipling Street, case number WZ-18-03, Kipling Village. At issue here, and this is an ordinance for second reading, at issue here, the applicant is requesting approval of an amendment to the outline development plan for the Camelot Club Apartments planned residential development located at 4635 and 4665 Kipling Street. The purpose of the amendment is to expand the uses allowed within 2 buildings on the property, to adjust the sign allowance, and to modernize the original plan development documents that date back to 1969. The subject area includes 2 parcels of land, the total size of which is approximately 7.5 acres.
Thank you very much. This is a quasi-judicial public hearing. Would the clerk please give us an ordinance number?
We have ordinance number 1657.
Thank you. As this is a quasi-judicial public hearing, if you intend to speak on this, would you please rise, and I need to swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter as you understand it? Thank you very much. You may sit down. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this?
We do. Mr. Johnstone will be giving the presentation this evening.
Mr. Johnstone.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll be brief. I think Mr. Matthews' introduction really pretty much covered it. This is a fairly simple ODP amendment. The property has been zoned PRD with an outline development plan since 1969, the year the city incorporated. And that ODP basically was for the development that's largely still there today. As you're probably aware, they've made some recent upgrades, and the ODP does reflect those recent upgrades, such as the streetscape improvements that they've made over the last 2 years. Back in that period of time at the city, we did a lot of plan districts that were very specific. They would tie down the uses to the exact number of units, the exact site layout, and as such, they're difficult to change over time. And essentially, what we're doing now is just making proposing to make some minor amendments that allows a few changes to occur. So specifically, they were limited to a certain maximum number of residential units. They have a couple spaces on the front portion of the property that at some point in time were designed to potentially to be used as retail spaces, but they've never really done well in the market, and they'd like to legally be able to convert those to residential uses. They actually were converted to residential uses a number of years ago, but without the proper city approvals. So as Mr. Matthews' summary indicated, that's really what they're asking for, is a slightly larger number of residential units to be allowed. They're also asking for a new sign location that wasn't allowable under the previous ODP. And those are really the two substantive things that they're asking for. We are packaging 2 agenda items tonight. There is the ordinance that's subject to the rezoning and the public hearing that requires council action. And then subsequent to that, there's a specific development plan that also requires separate council action, and that's being presented to you through resolution number 68. So sequential adoption of those is what's being presented to you, requested of you this evening, and the applicant is here. They don't desire to make a presentation, but they're available for questions, and as am I.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask our attorney, I had intended to make these part of the same public hearing. Is there a way to sort of get this back on track?
Sure. I think you can just declare that the testimony from Mr. Johnstone will be included as a part of the public hearing for agenda item numbers 2 and 3 together.
Then if there are no objections, I would like to declare that Mr. Johnstone's testimony will be applicable under the public hearing for items number 2 and 3, if there is no objection with the council. Thank you very much. I want to go to public comment before we go to questions from council. I have no one signed up. Is there anyone here in the hall who would like to speak on either item number 2 or 3 at this time? There are none, so I will open this up for questions from council. Seeing none, Mr. Matthews, may I have we'll take these as separate motions, so it'll be just a motion on item number 2, please.
I move to approve Council Bill number 27-2018, an ordinance approving an amendment to the outline development plan for the Camelot Club Apartments planned residential development on second reading, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication for the following reasons. Number 1, City Council has conducted a proper public hearing that meets all public notice requirements as required by Section 26-109 of the Code of Laws. Number 2, the requested rezoning has been reviewed by the Planning Commission, which has forwarded its recommendation of approval. And number 3, the requested rezoning has been found to comply with the criteria for review in Section 26-112E of the Code of Laws.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by
The whisperer over there.
actually, Ms. Duran. I think she got you with that. She just didn't have her mic on. So is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dozeman, would you please introduce item number 3?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 68-2018, a resolution approving a specific development plan for property zoned planned residential development at 4635 and 4665 Kipling Street, case number WZ-18-04/Kipling Village. And I think Ken Johnstone just kind of spoke to this issue.
Okay, were there any questions of staff on item number 4? Mr. Matthews.
Just kind of a point of order in a way. Down inside there under issue it says, it lists a 48th Avenue address. Is that a typo or is there something here I'm missing?
I apologize, that's a typo.
So it is, I just want to make everyone aware they're aware that it's the same properties on Kipling Street.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of staff? Ms. Dozman, would you please provide a motion for item number 3?
I move to approve resolution number 68-2018, a resolution approving a specific development plan on property zone planned residential development at 4635 and 4665 Kipling Street for the following reasons. 1, City Council has conducted a proper public hearing that meets all public notice requirements as required by Section 26-109 of the Code of Laws. 2, the proposed specific development plan has been reviewed by the Planning Commission, which has forwarded its recommendation of approval. And 3, all requirements of a specific development plan have been met.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Mr. Urban. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. We are ready for item number 4. Ms. Davis, would you please introduce item number 4 to the best of your ability?
Thank you. Council Bill number 28-2018, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning wildlife and waterfowl. Staff is recommending new rules and regulations concerning the feeding of wildlife and waterfowl be considered with existing regulations on the treatment of wild animals. This ordinance amends Chapter 4, Animals, Chapter 16, Miscellaneous Offense, and Chapter 17, Park Rules and Regulations.
Thank you very much. This is not a quasi-judicial public hearing. This is a public hearing on an ordinance for second reading. Does the clerk have an ordinance number for this?
We have ordinance number 1658.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this?
We don't have a presentation, but Joyce Manwaring, our Parks and Rec Director, is here, and Mr. Dollar, City Attorney, to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no one from the public signed up to speak on this. Is there anyone in the public here tonight who would like to speak on this item? I see none, so I will just open this up for questions of staff from council. Mr. Matthews.
I would like to thank Froggy for introducing the item on wildlife. Thank you.
I wanted to come and theme tonight.
That's very good. Some good sound effects tonight. All right. Ms. Davis, would you provide us a motion on item number 4, please?
I move to approve Council Bill number 26-2018, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning wildlife and waterfowl on second reading, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have an ordinance and a second, or a motion and a second. Do we have discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you very much. Mr. Matthews, would you introduce item number 5, please?
Thank you. Let me just blow this up so I can read it. The Council Bill number 29-2018, an ordinance amending Chapter 17 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the consumption of fermented malt beverages in city parks. This is an ordinance on second reading. At issue, staff is recommending new rules and regulations concerning the consumption of alcohol in city parks. These new rules align with the state of Colorado changes in the definition of fermented malt beverages that are effective January 1st, 2019. This change eliminates the current restriction of 3.2 fermented malt beverages, beer, only allowed in parks, and allows malt beverages of up to 6% alcohol by weight.
Thank you very much. This is a public hearing on an ordinance for second reading. Will the clerk please provide an ordinance number?
We have ordinance number 1659.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this?
Same as last time, Joyce Manwaring and Mr. Dollar here. I think Mr. Matthew read in the detail that you need to know about.
Thank you very much. I have no one signed up on the roster to speak on this item. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this item from the public? Seeing none, I will open the discussion and questioning to council for any questions of staff. I don't see any. Mr. Matthews, would you provide a motion for item number 5, please?
Yes, sir. I move to approve Council Bill number 29-2018, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the consumption of fermented malt beverages in city parks on second reading, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Ms. Davis. Got it. Oh, Leah, Ms. Dozeman, pardon me. Got to share the wealth here. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy, would you please introduce item number 6, if you can?
With pleasure. Council Bill number 30-2018, an ordinance amending Chapter 17 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning parks and recreation to address the use of electrical assisted bicycles. At issue, staff is recommending new rules and regulations concerning the use of electrical assisted bicycles on city trails. Electrical assisted bicycles are becoming more and more popular with bicycle riders throughout the metropolitan area. Currently, Chapter 17 of Wheat Ridge Code of Laws does not allow any type of motorized vehicles on park trails. This ordinance redefines bicycle to include electrical assisted bicycles and allows the usage of these bicycles on park and open space trails.
Thank you very much. This is an ordinance on second reading and a public hearing. Will the clerk please provide an ordinance number?
We have ordinance number 1660.
I'm going to open the public hearing. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this?
Once again, no. Joyce Manwaring and Jerry Dollar are both here. Just for the public's purpose, this item and the last 2 items, City Council has discussed these in study session, so they're not just rubber stamping these. So these items have been discussed several times, I believe, all 3 of them. So they're fairly simple code amendments, so no presentation.
Thank you. I have one person signed up from the public to speak, Rachel Holteen.
Good evening. My name is still Rachel Hulteen, and I still live at 4690 Balsam Street. I want to speak on behalf of the Wheat Ridge Active Transportation Advisory Team. And first and foremost, we really appreciate the thoughtful manner in which the city approached evaluating the use of e-bikes or electric bicycles, recognizing that it was something that was an unregulated issue on our trail system, our significant Clear Creek regional trail. I think council did a great job of soliciting input, and I think where we ended up on this in terms of recognizing and allowing the first 2 classes, but also recognizing it doesn't matter what kind of bike you're on, that you still need to respect other trail users. And I think, we should all hold all bicyclists, and as a bicycle advocate and an active bicyclist myself, it doesn't matter if you're on an e-bike or a regular bike, you should still ride with respect to other users on the Clear Creek Trail as well as on the roads. And oftentimes people who are on regular bikes are going faster than the speed limit on the trail as well. So if that is an issue, I think, it's oftentimes all types of riders, and the ADATs would be happy to work with the city on looking at ways for, creating a culture of respect on our trails. I think it's generally there, but we do hear incidents from time to time. So just want to thank you guys. I think this is a great outcome, and I think it's really thinking ahead. And I know at least I ran into one person in the room tonight who already told me he's waiting for his e-bike to come. So I think we're just going to see more and more of these. So thank you for your thoughtful approach to this.
Thank you. That is the only member of the public that I have signed up to speak on this item. Is there anyone else from the public here who would like to speak on this tonight? Okay, I will open this up for questions or comments from council of staff. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and a motion is in order. Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you. I move to approve Council Bill Number 30-2018, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the use of electrical assisted bicycles on second reading, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
Okay. Which one of you, Mr. Rand, you got it? Okay. You got to be on top of your game today. So we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Mr. Matthews.
I just wanted to clarify this for the folks that are here and at home, that we've been kind of assured, if any of you are concerned about this, that this should not affect the speed of bicycles on our bike paths, that we're limiting it to lower classes of bicycles so that you don't have to worry about folks driving 35 miles an hour on their bicycle down the bike paths, and that all the speed limits will remain in effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there more discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. We will move to item number 7. Mr. Pond, would you please introduce item number 7?
Yes, thank you. Item number 7, Council Bill number 34-2018, an ordinance approving the sale of designated parkland at the intersection of West 38th Avenue and Johnson Street in connection therewith, authorizing execution of an agreement for said sale.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on first reading, and a motion would be in order.
Thank you. 1 second. I move to approve Council Bill number 34-2018, an ordinance approving the sale of designated parkland at the intersection of West 38th Avenue and Johnson Street, and in connection therewith, authorizing execution of an agreement for said sale for the sole purpose of ordering it published and for a public hearing set for Monday, December 10th, 2018 at 7 p.m. in City Council chambers.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Ms. Hoppy. Do we have discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please poll the council? Okay. Will you clear the screen, and let's revote. Are we? Okay. We good to?
Motion carries 8-0.
Okay, thank you. We're moved to agenda item number 8. Ms. Dozman, would you please introduce item number 8?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill. We just finished.
We just did an item number 7. Please proceed with item number 8.
Council Bill number 33-2018, an ordinance approving a zone change from Agricultural 1A1 to Planned Residential Development, PRD, with an outline development plan for a property located at 4440 Tabor Street, case number WZ-18-15/Clear Creek Terrace. At issue, the applicant is requesting approval of a zone change from Agricultural 1 to Planned Residential Development with an outline development plan for property located at 4440 Tabor Street. The purpose of this request is to prepare the property for development of a 26-unit townhome project.
This is an ordinance on first reading to set a date for a public hearing. Ms. Dozman, a motion is in order.
I move to approve Council Bill number 33-2018, an ordinance approving the rezoning of property located at 4440 Tabor Street from Agricultural 1 to Planned Residential Development with approval of an outline development plan on first reading for the sole purpose of ordering it published for a public hearing set for Monday, January 14th, 2019 at 7 p.m. in City Council chambers, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Agenda item number 9. Mr. Urban, would you please introduce item number 9? Mr. Urban, would you please introduce item number 9, please?
Apologize about that. Council Bill number 32-2018, an ordinance approving the rezoning of property located at 6985 West 30th Avenue from Commercial 1 to Mixed Use Neighborhood, case number WZ-18-21, BARDA.
Thank you very much. This is an ordinance for first reading to set the date for a public hearing. Mr. Urban, would you please give us a motion?
I move to approve Council Bill number 32-2018, an ordinance approving the rezoning of property located at 6985 West 30th Avenue from Commercial 1 to Mixed Use Neighborhood on first reading for the sole purpose of ordering it published for a public hearing set for Monday, January 14th, 2019 at 7 p.m. in the City Council chambers, and if adopted, that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to item number 10. We're going to have a lot of public comment on item number 10, and I would hope that the agreement that we made with respect to the courtesy employed to speakers would be followed under this item also. So, Mr. Fitzgerald, will you please introduce item number 10?
This is a motion. Reconsideration of Ordinance 1656, Series 2018, imposing a temporary moratorium on the acceptance, processing, and approval of certain building permits and declaring an emergency. Issue, reconsideration of Ordinance 1656, Series 2018, opposing a temporary moratorium on the acceptance, processing, and approval of building permits for single-family residences within administratively approved subdivisions in the R1 zone district.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, I understand that you have some background information on this.
Mr. Dahl does, yes.
Mr. Dahl does. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for your attention. I want to give you a sort of a quick overview of the procedure here, because the reconsideration doesn't come up frequently in front of the Council, but when it does, there's sort of a series of steps, and they're not exactly intuitive. And some of you perhaps haven't participated in reconsideration before, and I know that the members of the public who are here are going to want to know, well, what's the process here? What are the rules? What do we do first, second, third, and fourth? How's this processed? And of course, you'll get to public testimony, but first, let me say that the Council adopted this ordinance on October 22nd. You have a Council rule that permits reconsideration of ordinances or really any action that you take, and your Council rule is specific in saying that you can reconsider an action only at that same meeting or the next regular meeting. And this is the next regular meeting since October 22nd. You've had study sessions, but that doesn't count. This is the next regular meeting. At your recent study session, there was a consensus for me to prepare this item for your consideration tonight in the event someone wanted to make a motion to reconsider. As I say, that motion has to be made tonight, if at all. If it's not made tonight, then you're done, and the moratorium ordinance, which runs until the 20th of January, remains in effect. Because you haven't reconsidered, you've stuck with what you did on October the 22nd. If there is a motion to reconsider, it has to be made by a member who voted with the prevailing side. There were 6 council members present on October 22nd, and I believe all 6 voted in favor of the motion to adopt that ordinance. So any of you are eligible to make a motion to reconsider. That motion itself has to pass by a majority of the entire council, so says the rules. So that means by 5 votes. And I'll get to who can do that in a minute. The rule goes on to say that council members who were absent when the matter being reconsidered was originally adopted can participate only if they have reviewed or listened to the tape or the video of the meeting. And of course, council members Pond and Duran were not at the meeting on October 22nd, and I've confirmed with council member Pond that he has seen the video of the agenda item from October 22nd where you took the motion to approve that ordinance, and so he is permitted to participate in the discussion. He needs to be, so he can participate in the discussion. Councilmember Duran has not reviewed that video, and so she's not able to participate in the discussion.
Sorry, Mr. Dahl. Ms. Duran was present. It was myself, Ms. Hoppy, who was not present for
Really?
the meeting. Yep. And
All this time.
We've got it right here.
All this time.
And I did review both of
terrific.
the video and the notes.
All right, then. Then everybody can participate. It's wonderful. It's great. So that solves that problem. So you've got the ability to, everyone's got the ability to vote and participate in discussion. If you would turn to the council action form, the second page, this is where it gets a little counterintuitive, and that's where the typical motions are. And I've placed two motions there. Obviously, if no motion at all is made, as I pointed out, you're done, and you're sticking with what you did on the 22nd of October. If a motion is made, it would be the first motion to reconsider. That has to be made by, as I say, someone who voted on the prevailing side, and it has to pass by 5 votes. I should say that the bottom line is this: if you want the moratorium to continue in effect, then you don't want to reconsider it, do you? You want it to remain in effect. So if your goal is that you wish the moratorium to remain in effect, then you would not wish to reconsider that. Vote against the motion to reconsider. It won't get reconsidered if that motion fails. And again, you're done, and the moratorium remains in effect. If, however, that motion to reconsider passes, what you've really done then is, and I've said this before, gotten in a time machine and gone back to the point in time just before you adopted the original emergency ordinance back in October 22nd. And therefore, if it passes, you've gotten in the time machine, and you now haven't either adopted the ordinance or not. So the next motion that would be appropriate, since you wish to reconsider, would be a motion to postpone that ordinance, the proposed ordinance, indefinitely. You know, when you get ordinances, we always give you 2 choices, right? Move to approve the ordinance, move to postpone it indefinitely. I could have given you 2 more motions here, but when you think about it, if you move to reconsider and your goal is to have the ordinance stay in place, move to reconsider, you pass that, and then you pass another motion to approve the ordinance. Well, you're back where you began in any event. Just oppose reconsideration, and you're done there. So I wanted to, again, it's a little counterintuitive, and in a minute I'll ask if you've got any questions, and we can go through it. Make sure everybody's clear on the procedure. Obviously, the policy is up to you, but the procedure I want to make sure is clear and people don't misunderstand. You have a present moratorium. It's in existence. And if you don't make a motion to reconsider, or if your motion to reconsider fails, if made, fails, and it has to get 5 votes, you're done. And again, that moratorium ordinance remains in place. It only gets taken off if you go further. You pass a motion to reconsider, and somebody then moves to postpone that indefinitely, that emergency ordinance, and the moratorium comes off. Sorry for this lengthy explanation, but I know that a lot of questions may get raised, and I just wanted to make sure you heard from me. I'll take any questions after that. It's time for public comment. A lot of people are signed up, and when we're done with that, it's council action. This is not a quasi-judicial matter. It's not a public hearing in that sense, so witnesses don't need to be sworn. Questions on the procedure?
Mr. Dahl, I was not at that meeting, and I have read through the packet, and I have read the minutes of that meeting, but I have not watched the video.
You vote only in the event of a tie on the council, and
is he allowed to vote on an ordinance?
He votes. He doesn't vote at all.
I mean, to break a tie. I thought it was budget items and ordinances. The mayor was not allowed to break a tie.
No, it's exclusively adoption or amendment of the budget. Okay. That's the only time the mayor doesn't break the tie. well, you don't vote on ordinances unless there is a tie to approve an ordinance. So let's see how it goes, but my inclination would be that you're allowed to vote on procedural matters, such as considering the matter for reconsideration. I don't believe you would vote on the matter to postpone indefinitely, because that's voting on an ordinance. If you weren't present for the discussion, I think I would treat you the same way I would treat a council member in terms of the ability to vote on the substantive motion itself. I wasn't aware, I'd forgotten that it was Councilmember Fitzgerald that was in the chair. With that, just give me a second. I want to make sure that I think through this right. If you weren't present, yeah, you have a controlling role if you're going to break a tie and if you were not there, even though the rule talks about council members who have been absent, and you're the mayor, not a council member, and the charter talks about those two roles separately. Let's see if there is a tie. Give me a chance to think about that, because we may not have to face that.
Very good.
If we do, I'll try to field that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I would like to go to a public comment. We have, sort of a page and a half of people who would like to speak. So when I get you called up here, and I'll give the person speaking and the person on deck, please be ready with your comments. And we will start with Stephanie Garcia and Bob Brazel on deck. Well, 7 is an item on first reading, and we don't take public comment on first reading. I'm sorry, sir. Okay. So then Ms. Garcia and then Elizabeth Grant will be our second person on deck.
Good evening. As many of you know, my name is Stephanie Garcia. I reside at 2050 Raleigh Street in Denver, but I am the property owner of the recently subdivided lot at 4055 Everett Street. I'm appearing before you to respectfully reiterate my request that you immediately lift the costly and onerous moratorium. I wish to file my building permit application, and the moratorium is preventing me from doing so. This moratorium continues to cost me both financially and emotionally. I spent time and money meeting all the subdivision requirements and have incurred pre-development costs in addition to having already lost one contractor due to the delay. The cost continues to increase with each week of delay. I've followed all the rules and regulations in place and corrected misstatements and shared information with council and neighbors and addressed concerns when presented with them. To recap, though, in case my corrections, compliance, costs, and efforts aren't compelling enough, my home front setbacks are greater than many existing in Lee Dowd subdivision. My lot is larger than many on Field Drive. My home footprint is smaller than most in Bel Air. My open space exceeds that required by code and is visible from the streets and not hidden in a private backyard. Driven by my own passion and preservation priorities, I created a home to meet today's needs without fully exploiting the height and lot coverage that I could have. It is shorter than the recent remodels and new constructions in Bel Air. It covers less ground than most of the homes in Bel Air, and it will be surrounded by lawn and graced with 2 mature trees. This is a thoughtful infill project that, due to misinformation spread by a few individuals, has garnered neighborhood opposition. This misinformation continues as there's a dedicated and restricted Facebook page that I recently learned about, spouting the same things that I corrected on the 5th of November. To my detriment, individuals are trying to use this council process to circumvent the existing code with which I complied. The city has already approved my subdivision, and so it seems to me that preventing me from building any use by right on the new lot would effectively be an illegal taking of my property. Most importantly, I can't imagine how my plans to construct a new home on the approved lot constitute an emergency. It doesn't threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. Nor does a moratorium on building permits do anything to address the administrative subdivision process, which is so displeased. Continuing unnecessary delay on my building permit application is a targeted, costly, and unfair means to address dissatisfaction. Please vote immediately to lift the moratorium so I can file my building permit application. I remain willing to able to answer any questions or concerns that come up, and I want to thank you again for your time and attention to this issue, and I beg you to not permit the volume of opposition present tonight to trump the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Grant and Catherine Grant on deck.
This goes back to what we were talking about before. My name's Elizabeth Grant.
Would you
I'm at
would you please-
3881 Estes Street.
Thank you very much.
In the Bellard-Ledoud subdivision. It's too bad it's contentious, but I think it's contentious because things were done and not done, and they're not being, it's like the elephant in the room and the things under the rug, and they're being swept under the rug. This is too bad. I talked to two women that live right there by Lonnie Smith's old house. And they said Stephanie never told them, that she never breathed a word about what she was going to do. I'll skip over to this. So when the codes were changed in 2014, before that, this would have been sent to the Planning Commission. The neighbors would have been notified. They would have had a placard out in the front yard. And things get, the announcement gets mailed so that they get a piece of mail in the, personally, so that they can read about this. Nothing was said about this. They were shocked, dismayed. Some of them were in tears. There was a lot of emotion, but I think they felt ripped off. And I think it goes back to, it's a pity that the code was changed in 2014 so that this didn't stay with the normal procedure where this would be a minor subdivision and go to the Planning Commission so that it would have been posted and letters sent. A minor subdivision goes to the Planning Commission. A major subdivision goes to the Planning Commission and the City Council. That would fix this. And I think that's what you should do. Just put it back the way it was before 2014. This neighborhood is a tiny little curvy neighborhood that's kind of pretty, like, you know, Sleeping Beauty or something. It's just off the beaten track, and it's sweet. And it was designed around the original farmhouse and the original pond. And then there's a chain of ponds, and it was where the farm was run by. Our heritage is farmland, and we're not snobs. And the people that were posting were mainly real estate people and developers, and they want to do this to other places. So they were arguing and saying, why can't we, you know, poo-poo on you, change is good. I mean, they were sidestepping the issue that this is an intimate neighborhood where people, because of the curve of the streets, they know each other and they interact with each other all the time. You shouldn't use a cookie cutter approach where one size fits all and everything is the same no matter where citywide. And in this November 5th study session agenda, there's some suggestions, and one of them is to have an overlay zone, have overlay zone districts that would exempt those zones from the ability to do subdivision and build 2 homes on one person's property. I think it should be citywide, and I don't think an overlay zone is particularly the best solution. I think you should address this citywide so it's taken care of once and for all, and anybody who's, I know a lot of you have gone and driven by to see it. It's weird. It's weird, it's exceptional, it's extraordinary, this idea of a 2-story building sitting. The corner was meant to be a vista that takes the eye around the corner. And it was done in an age when Lee Dowd had an artistic vision, an aesthetic, and he translated it into the way he laid out the property. Partly it's because it's a little bit rolling and whatnot, and the streets follow the curvature. But it's the unique place in Wheat Ridge, and it's an envisioned Wheat Ridge as a kind of a, as Larry was saying, an oasis. And this is ugly. It's just ugly. She didn't tell her neighbors, the ones that are new neighbors, she didn't say a word. Why didn't she say, I'm planning on putting another house in my front yard? Why didn't she say that? It's because they would have come to you and they would have said, please, oh, please don't approve that. That's what would have happened. So, you know, costing her emotionally, boo-hoo. I mean, this has made everybody feel terrible. So it's ugly, and she's going to, her mom is sick, and her mom has Alzheimer's apparently, and it's going to end up being a rental property. It's kind of too bad. It really is. So please put it back to the prior to 2014 so this doesn't ever happen again. And if you possibly could encourage her to do a scrape and build, she could use her $500,000 loan to either extend the original house or do a scrape. But what's the difference? It's because there'll be a rental, and that's kind of junky for our neighborhood, frankly. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Catherine Grant, and Jay Peck on deck.
Hi, everybody. I just found out about this a few days ago, so I feel a little bit ill-prepared, but I'll try to speak off the cuff on what I'm thinking.
Could you give us your name?
Yes, I'm Catherine Grant, 3881 Estes Street. So just being somebody who grew up in Denver and Wheat Ridge, it's been really painful to watch all the changes in, for example, the Highlands neighborhood, which is unrecognizable. I had somebody a great friend who was living there just 4 years ago, and he was in the neighborhood, and he can't even recognize it. And I can just totally see that happening to Wheat Ridge, and Wheat Ridge is such a little gem. I thought that there was a process. I thought it was still in place. I had no idea that it had changed in 2014. And so and probably the neighbors didn't either, so they had no idea. I don't want to say that their rights were being violated because it sounds so harsh and almost over the top, but it kind of feels that way. If they're used to that and they're expecting that, and then all of a sudden they don't have that at their disposal, it's a real shocker to be told, well, hey, by the way, your neighbor next door is building another house in their front yard. It just really changes the look and feel of the neighborhood. And I was in communication with Wanda Sang, who used to be on the city council a long time ago, and she can't be here tonight, but this is what I hope I can read this properly. My parents bought their house here in 1950. It was an unincorporated Jeffco at the time. It is south of 44th on Brentwood, so right next door to Bel Air, which is what we're talking about here is Bel Air. The lot is a quarter acre, sorry, I feel like I'm too loud. As all in his area are. Wheat Ridge was incorporated in 1969 to avoid being absorbed into Denver. Arvada and Lakewood, the citizens wanted to stay, the citizens wanted to keep the unique post-farming community of its heritage. The early zoning was kept to stay true to that concept, as my mom was saying. As a city clerk and council member, I cannot even remember an R1 zoned area not having the notifications for neighborhood input going to the planning committee and 2 hearings before city council with even more public input. This should never be considered okay in R1 zoning. That's, I thought she put that really well, so I wanted to share that with all of you. It just feels like a real tragedy when something is beautifully planned and then is completely changed, you know, to be something else. And yeah, she wants housing for her mom, and I totally love that, and I respect that. But I just, obviously she could build onto the existing structure and not have two houses. It just would significantly change the look and feel of the neighborhood and what it was planned to be. And it would just be really lovely to preserve what is good about this. It's a special thing in Wheat Ridge. And, you know, like she was saying, there's this onslaught online, and I mean, I've been called an elitist because I've mourned the loss of the old Olinger's building, which was a historic and beautiful building with rose gardens. I just would really like to preserve what's beautiful about Wheat Ridge, and this is part of that. So yeah, I'd really like to go back to the way it was prior to 2014, which was like 50 years of people being notified, and this series of hearings and public input for such large change in a intimate neighborhood where people are really invested in the neighborhood and in their neighbors. And yeah, so I hope that that's possible. Thank you guys, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Jay Peck, City Council. I'm here to speak for Bel Air. Bel Air, there are two other communities similar to Bel Air in Wheat Ridge, but Bel Air has curvy streets, and all the rest of the streets in the entire community are straight. A distinction, right? Something different. We in Bel Air have big lots, big trees, big squirrels, and we raise families. That's what we do. We don't warehouse them with a split lot. We raise families. This is quality. This is value. This is the place to go when you've worked exceptionally hard in this terrible world at times to live. You build your family there. In Bel Air, if you want to put up a storage shed, you've got to get a bunch of neighbors to say, yeah. But you don't need neighbors to put up a potential $1 million thing down the street that doesn't fit in. Something's wrong here, folks. There's something very wrong. Mr. Dahl, sir, you in option 4 made some mention of potentials for looking at this particular type of problem so that it might not have to go on again and again. Let's try to get rid of the problem here tonight for all time. And if we can't, let's change the law. We're going to have to do something. Nobody wants to talk about this, and I don't blame you. I can see the other side too. Option 4, I believe, holds the key. As a heritage property, something else in there that could be used to strengthen the town as well as preserve the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Suzanne Teal and Sandy Nance on deck.
Hello, my name's Suzanne Teal, and I live at 4079 Field Drive. And I've been in this home on Field Drive for the last 29 years, and I'm very familiar with the street and the neighborhood and the adjacent neighborhoods. I've done a lot of walking and running, and I know pretty much all the good views and everything that I usually look at as I go around. But I think it's hard to understand what we're feeling, but the whole little street that I live on, we all have this feeling of, you know, how nice it is, and the things we want to preserve are the rural park-like feel. It's like these big lots, and you can see the views through them and see their backyards, and it's that that openness, and you know, that it's so unique to a lot of neighborhoods. And also the way the whole subdivision is kind of built on a slope. So you get the feeling of the ups and downs and seeing out different areas. And the people on my side of the field drive actually back up to the creek, so we have these beautiful views. So we're really lucky to live there. And I guess in the low traffic, quiet, it's nice to have that, you know. And I can't imagine, you know, that becoming more, you know, a lot, an increase in traffic. And I just think the whole higher density, it's okay. I mean, we can do it in some parts of the city, but why do we need to do it everywhere? And can't we have little areas that are preserved just the way they were when they were built? So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandy Nance and Gail Thompson on deck.
Hello, my name is Sandy Nance, N-A-N-C-E. I live at 4097 Field Drive. I've spoken before. The people in Wheatridge who, I've had a realtor, let me back up, a realtor tell me this is the best neighborhood. This Bel Air neighborhood is the best neighborhood in the whole city of Denver because of the unique homes, the sighting, the views, and this 4055 Everett lot is the best lot, best view. It's got, I love walking, that is a view lot. And we always assumed that somebody would build a large, beautiful home to take advantage of that view. Instead, we get this ugliness of this, and she said it was going to be, it wasn't, I called it a slot home because it was tall and skinny. And technically, I've been talking to the developer, and she said, well, what looks like 2 stories, because there's 2 level windows, it's really just super tall roof inside. Okay, it's not 2 stories outside. It's a garage level and then super tall. She said it's not 25 feet wide, which I told before. It's around 30 feet wide, and part of it's 40 feet wide. She said she'd talked to she'd sent a message to the neighbors. She didn't talk to the neighbors. She sent an email to one person. Let me go back. I think that you decided to put this, to revoke the moratorium at a meeting which there was a lot of emotional family matters that were interjected. I don't think that's appropriate. I want to talk about the issue at hand that a city staffer has the sole right to approve subdivisions of a lot and to create flag lots instead of notifying neighbors and holding a hearing. While the new subdivision rules gave staffer no choice, the rules also say flag lots are not encouraged but are permitted when they are the most appropriate option as determined by the community development director. And he gave no evidence he was aware he had the right to disapprove creation of a flag lot. I call on the council to force the community development director to rule on whether or not creating a flag lot at 4055 Everett is an appropriate development action. And to fix this egregious denial of public input. If people ask for a public hearing, they should be able to get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gail Thompson and Amy Burkett on deck.
Hello, my name is Gail Thompson. I live at 4020 Everett Street.
And tonight, I would like to appeal to the council, city council, to keep this ordinance in place until we come to some solution for all. I've heard tonight that there were some viable solutions from council meetings previously, such as participating in Envision Wheat Ridge meetings, the neighborhood revitalization plan, get our voices heard through that corridor. And also, I heard something about zoning overlays. Keeping this current ordinance in place will give us the opportunity to change perhaps a subdivide that does not support good planning or good design. The council could take direction from other municipalities that quite commonly use these zoning overlays for subdivisions. I'm not an expert about them. I'm just saying that a zoning overlay, in my opinion, created by the city planners, could help other neighbors in Wheat Ridge right now currently affected by this moratorium, who are not really part of the Bel Air community or neighborhood. And it would alleviate some of the hardships that they're going through, because we don't want to have hardships for everybody. But City of Denver also uses zoning overlays as a strategy to protect neighborhoods, and specifically helps us to narrow the scope for specific issues in specific neighborhoods like Bel Air. And I think this could give us the time to find that viable solution of this subdivide issue in Bel Air. I'm not in favor of this project. I just want it noted for Stephanie and others. I'm not on Facebook. I've never used Facebook in my life. And I haven't been spreading misinformation. The only information that I have spread is right here at this city council meeting, and I've spoken several times. Again, I live across the street from this project. It would be a house in front of a house. And I believe that this hurts my future's home's property values and others in my neighborhood as well on our street. Poor plans, poor design. And I understand that Stephanie Garcia has met the requirements to split her lot, but the decision should not just be about ticking off those boxes. It should be about considering if this is the most appropriate development option for the Bel Air neighborhood. I really do feel that that is the charge of the city manager and the community development director. And in this case, perhaps they failed to consider that this is not the most appropriate development for our neighborhood. So again, I would like to encourage you to keep this moratorium in place so that we can consider viable options for a solution. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amy Burkett and Rachel Holteen on deck.
I have a few images that I'd like to put up on the screen, if okay. It's on a flash drive.
Flash drive, we don't,
Yeah.
we have to look. The computer's not on, sir.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You can start speaking if you'd like.
Okay, sounds good. My name is Amy Burkett, B-U-R-K-E-T-T. I live at 4040 Everett Street. I'm an architect. I'm a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. There's only 3%. I think I have a pretty good assessment of design and planning. I'm also not anti-development. It's part of my business is to work with developers to help create successful development. With that, we bought our house at about a few weeks after Stephanie Garcia bought her house at 4055 Everett. She'd come over to our house, we'd come over to their property, talked about, she asked us what we were doing. Never was there any discussion that she had any plan such as this to put a new house in front of the existing house, putting a house in her front yard, essentially. So as a quality developer, one of the biggest organizations for all development in the United States and in the world, actually, is an organization called ULI, Urban Land Institute. ULI represents responsible leadership. And one of their proclamations really is, here this is a quote, involving the community in neighborhood planning. As a sophisticated developer, and Stephanie's done some great things, to me, this particular property development does not follow involving the community in neighborhood planning or any of the wonderful guidelines and principles that are in ULI's documents. Neighborhoods are building blocks that shape a city's identity. These are all aspects that create wonderful and great planning, and Bel Air has been beautifully planned, and that's why I was attracted to it. I looked throughout the entire city of Denver, and within a 30-mile radius around the center of Denver, looking for this beautiful, rural, gorgeous development, residential community. Also, from a fundamental standpoint, from a planning aspect, corner lots are very sensitive. As one neighbor mentioned, that this corner is probably the most powerful corner in the entire gorgeous development of our neighborhood. And so immediately we're chopping it into two, and that's why I want to show you a few of these images that I had drawn to show you. As you're walking down Everett Street to the corner, looking to the vista of the mountains, you will suddenly see the ends of two houses. That original house also could be developed into 2 stories. It can be bigger any day that her family decides to sell that. So I did a few sketches just to show what that might look like and how it really starts to impede and diminish heavily the beautiful rolling landscape that we have in our neighborhood.
Can somebody else want to speak?
Some
while
new
this-
updates.
Can somebody else speak while we're,
Yeah.
you want to?
Is that okay? We switch and then I come.
It might take a minute, Mr. Mayor, maybe.
Would you like to let this load up and then come back when it's ready? So if someone would alert me when it comes on, we'll come back to you in a little bit. So our next speaker then would be Rachel Hulteen and Karen Jenny on deck.
Good evening, Rachel Hulteen, 4690 Balsam Street. And I feel like this is probably one of the most complicated issues that I've seen come up since I've been tracking the comings and goings of Wheat Ridge City Council. And I have really complicated feelings personally about this, because when I first moved to Wheat Ridge, this was the neighborhood that I would walk my dogs almost every day. It was just, it was spectacular, and the hills kind of added a little extra workout. But on those walks, I really came to appreciate that this was a really, really special neighborhood. And I'd been in real estate for a long time and had never really encountered it. And it just truly, Bel Air is a hidden gem. By the way, it's almost there, the download here. So I really just intimately appreciate the uniqueness of this neighborhood. And I think if there was a single neighborhood in this city that we were to wrap in plastic wrap and trying to keep it as well preserved as possible, I believe it's Bel Air. Now, I haven't walked every street in the city yet, but so I understand where it comes from trying to protect the specialness of it.
And I think that this conversation is incredibly important to start looking at what do we need to do to protect those heritage neighborhoods that really make Wheat Ridge. And I very much support looking at overlay districts for neighborhoods like Bel Air. You know, I also want to be really aware when we're talking about the specialness. I think everyone thinks their neighborhood is special in Wheat Ridge, and that's why we're all here today. My neighborhood's really special. I heard a deer walk through my front yard today. It was spectacular. So we each have a different sense of specialness, but I think when we look at civic processes, and as our community grapples with change today, has grappled with change in the past, and will be changing in the future, I think the perception that someone can come in and do everything that the city has said that they need to do, and then get that rug yanked out from underneath them without due process, I think that's hard. I think, you know, we've grappled with that before with the property at 38th and Miller, and those ripples still resonate through our community. And so I recognize that tonight we're really looking at balancing the deep desire to preserve the Bel Air neighborhood and that rich understanding and passion that the residents have for it. And also recognizing that, you know, people come into our city, whether it's working with getting a building permit, you know, different code inspection things, there's a lot of different processes we go through, and how much do we want to bog down every commission and every city council meeting with all of these administrative details. And I don't have the answer to that. And I guess as much as anything, I want to speak to the process of citizens being involved. And I'm glad that we're here tonight, because I feel like the discussion tonight is representative of the whole of the community, much more so than the night that the emergency ordinance was drafted. That was drafted without any notification to the community that might happen. There's several people in the room that were negatively impacted by that. So I hope that what we're really thinking about is what kind of process are we telling all of our citizens to expect, and how do we change moving forward so things like Bel Air neighbors aren't alarmed by something that they felt that they should have been notified by. So I hope that you guys can deliberate that balance. There's no right answer to that, but whatever the next steps are, I hope that that's really the foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burkett, I see a change in the screen. Do you think that we're ready to proceed?
All right, thank you. So again, just to back up a minute, I think the key thing here is that the steps were followed, but followed in a manner that is harmful to me. I bought my house with the intent of my property value being appreciating, and by having this development in front of my house is going to be an absolute negative to the value of the appreciation to my land and to my house. So looking at this shows the house in front. The house in back is the original house. Can you all see that? Yeah. And the house in front is the new house. And it's, if you can imagine the distance between those houses, yes, they meet the 15-foot setback for a backyard and 30-foot setback for the front yard, total 45 feet. That's about the length of this room. And so anyone in that back house is going to be looking directly into the back of another house. And you can imagine that house, from a value standpoint, is going to diminish from a comp standpoint any other house in the neighborhood. Let's see here. This is a view, and I apologize, these are not exact dimension, so this would be sunk into the ground by about a half a story. But the main point here is that you're going to be looking, as you're walking down Everett Street, you're looking at the ends of two houses. A flag lot, typically, when you read about flag lots, it talks about a house being buried behind another house. This is a house being dropped in front of another house. It's certainly not buried, and it's certainly at a critical juncture in the neighborhood. So this is showing it with a single story, which could, in the future, easily be ripped down and a larger one even yet built there. So this little study shows, again, as you're walking down Everett Street toward the corner of Field before you're taking a turn there, what you're going to see and how that density and beauty is completely disrupted by this anomaly, this odd thing of having the sides of two houses face a street, basically. So in closing, my comments would be for the city council and mayor to consider doing an overlay to our neighborhood or to any other special neighborhoods within Wheat Ridge. The other piece is to, it's called a protected district. So Mayor, you and Mayor Hancock and all the mayors within our great state hang out together. There have been amazing, wonderful methodologies to protect something like this from happening, and I'd really like to maintain and hope we can enforce and maintain this moratorium until we can create the appropriate process to ensure that this can't really happen in protected neighborhoods and special districts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Karen Jenny and Melissa Chafin on deck.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. My name is Karen Jenny, Jenni. I live at 4070 Field Drive. I am a newcomer to the neighborhood. I bought my house 2 years ago. I moved from a neighborhood in Denver that underwent rapid and dramatic change while I was living in it. I've experienced development on almost every lot around my previous home. And I think the lesson I took from this is that there's a difference between meeting legal requirements and being neighborly. So I had properties developed right next to me by people who lived in the property, who communicated often and frequently about what they were doing, and properties across the street that were purchased and redeveloped without people in the neighborhood ever hearing what was going on. And it's hard to maintain that kind of communication, and it takes more time, and it's so much better for the people who live in the neighborhood. And I don't think that that has happened enough here. And I think there are a couple reasons, and part of it is the administrative subdivisions that can happen without public hearing. And I understand that that's accomplished for this particular lot, but I'd like you to think about for the rest of the city, putting in place either option 1 or 2 that came from the from staff, I think, about asking for public hearings, even on administrative divisions. And some of the comments about why we don't do that is, that if a ministerial action isn't really optional, so they didn't want, I think what I saw was, we don't want people to have a false sense of their ability to affect the action. I don't think that's enough of a reason not to allow public comment, and I think it forces the conversation to happen earlier in the process, and that's, I think, what we need all around, is people talking about how their properties are going to be changed as early as possible. So that's the first thing that I'd like. And then I'd urge you to keep the moratorium in place while we actively explore options for managing situations like this. I like option 4 of the overlay districts. I know that requires a lot of work on your part and on the community's part to discuss those and to develop those. But again, having lived in a community where Denver City Council postponed action for a long time. Well, very dramatic change happened in the neighborhood. Things move faster than you think they will. So if we could maintain the moratorium and look at some of these zoning options quickly, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Melissa Chafin. Thank you. Then our next speaker is Nicole Carter and Connie Herrick on deck.
I actually sent you guys an email, so I don't know if that can be put into public comment at this point, but I would refer to that, if that's okay.
That's fine. I don't know that it will be read into the record unless you've made arrangements for it to do that.
No, I guess I just assumed that it was something that could be processed within the other comments, but
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Then our next speaker is Connie Herrick and Kelly Hicks on deck.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Connie Herrick. I have lived at 4005 Everett Street, which is 2 doors south of the property in question. I've lived at this address for 35 years, and for the record, I embrace change. I've loved the remodels and the additions that we've seen. And in fact, 14 years ago, my husband and I did an extensive addition and remodel because we decided that the quality of life that we had in Bel Air was worth the investment. We worked with an architect for several months. We had a scale model built. We showed it to the neighbors, and we were open and forthcoming. In the process of this, we decided to take advantage of the view to the north, and we built a front sitting area. That area faces north and east. With the proposed new project, we will be looking at the side of a house. What I don't understand is why, when someone in the neighborhood wanted to build an addition to his garage that needed a variance, or when someone wants to put in artificial turf, signs are posted in their yard about public hearings, and yet when someone's going to subdivide, the residents are not informed. I too had several pleasant conversations regarding the property with Ms. Garcia and her business partner Mario. There was never any mention of the second house. I was simply stunned when I heard about it. I feel like the city of Wheat Ridge has let us down to some extent. We've supported tax increases, recreation projects, and I have friends in other communities who receive letters, some of them certified, or regular mail when a proposal to subdivide is made. We received nothing because of the change in 2014, and as a result, there are bad feelings on both sides. My neighbors who have assembled here for the past few meetings are not an angry mob or an angry mob with pitchforks that's been stated in social media. We're people who love our community, and we just simply weren't informed by the city of Wheat Ridge that a subdivision was a possibility. You can see from the attendance tonight and from previous meetings that if we had known before this was granted, we would have come to you with our concerns. We were not given that opportunity. So I ask that you listen to us now and continue the moratorium because we're living with the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kelly Hicks and Ryan Mitchell on deck. Is Kelly Hicks here? And is Ryan Mitchell here? Okay. Then we will turn the page over. And Jim Karasnek is next speaker, and Laura Whitfield is on deck. Mr. Karasnek, are you here? Oh, Kazbarek, I'm sorry. When they get more complicated than Smith and Lee, my diction fails me.
Hi, my name is Jim Kazmarek. I live across the street from the development that's going to be proposed to be built. We've lived there for 21 years. Oh, I forgot to spell my name. It's Kaczmarek. We just really love the neighborhood, enjoy the farm-like atmosphere. What I tell a lot of people that I know about Wheat Ridge is that it's great. It's just an awesome place to live because it's like living in the country, but we're in the city. We're, easy access to 38th, to 44th, to downtown, to Arvada. Everything is just really, really awesome. And we're just opposed to having that house right on the corner and make it more like a city like Denver, crowded, less access, less quiet, and less countryside type atmosphere. So we're opposed to the build and to the lot split, so we just ask that you keep the moratorium on until we can get better resolution to the issues that were presented this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lauren Whitfield and Julie Hahn on deck. Thank you. Our next speaker then is Julie Hahn and Taylor Garcia on deck. Thank you. Then our next speaker is Taylor Garcia and Jenny Apple on deck. She's already spoken. Okay. So our next speaker is Jenny Apple and Lou Garcia on deck.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Apel, and I have been before you in the last discussion, excuse me, of this lifting the moratorium at 4055 Everett. And I ask you this evening, Council, to please consider that Ms. Garcia has met all of the subdivision rules and regs as laid out by the City of Wheat Ridge, and that the city has approved the subdivision. With that, I also bring to light, because this discussion this evening has brought these topics to light, there is not an HOA in Bel Air. The Bel Air subdivision is not part of a historic district. And I'm a champion of historic districts, by the way, so coming back to who I am and what I do, the company that I own is called Nostalgic Homes, and I have championed quite a few historic districts throughout my 24-year career. So I'm a big fan of them. It's not to say that I'm not and that I don't appreciate the current environment and pleasure that is already present in Bel Air. But what I do ask for you to consider as you vote on this evening is that this bill will not eliminate any neighborhood interaction. In fact, it can enhance it. Bel Air is currently, of course, a very foot-friendly neighborhood, and it will continue to be a very foot-friendly neighborhood. This home will not take away from that reality in any sense whatsoever, and that it will continue to be very much a front porch neighborhood, although I would also say that Bel Air is very much a back porch neighborhood as well. And the home that is currently 4055 Everett has a tremendous backyard view as well. That going further, this home will not be a rental, rather it will be an owner-occupied property, and I'm certain that somebody will happily raise a family here. And I would ask that the neighbors give thought to this truth, and that is that this house will not decrease the value of your neighborhood in any way whatsoever. And that, lastly, concluding, I respectfully request that you lift the moratorium on this bill, please. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lou Garcia and Steve Kenny on deck.
evening. My name is Lori Garcia, and I did not come here to speak. I just wanted to make some, allow Stephanie my time to address some of the misstatements and incorrect information that you've listened to from the neighborhood this evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Steve Kenny and Chris Chidley on deck.
Good evening, Mayor Starker and City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I also attended the study session a few weeks ago. I was not present for the meeting on the 22nd of October. I have watched it on video. I am a residential real estate broker. I sell 40 to 50 houses a year. I've been doing so now for 18 years. I am a resident of the city of Wheat Ridge and have been for 5 years. And I am one of those who owns a property that has been affected by this moratorium, that I have become entangled on what is a targeted approach with this moratorium to Stephanie Garcia. I can tell you that this moratorium absolutely, positively diminishes property rights. And there are some very significant legal implications to that I think that the city and you all need to be aware of. I may be among those who would bring legal action against the city as a result of what is happening here. As a realtor, I can tell you that for both residential and for commercial property prospective buyers, seeing something like this does make a difference. It will scare them away. I think this is something we need to pay a lot of attention to. It's something that was brought up in a peripheral manner in the NRS study that was presented a few weeks ago. And that is, there are already some misconceptions and some significant concerns about what direction the city is going. And we need to pay attention to those details. This moratorium will absolutely tarnish the perspective by realtors, and that does matter. I know that there are a lot of people here who want to have nothing change at all, but it does matter. If we want a vibrant, economically healthy city, it matters. This issue that we are discussing tonight, item number 10, I think is a part of a greater issue that we need to look at and that we need to address head on. It is not just the Bel Air neighborhood. It is not just what I would characterize as a valiant attempt by the planning department to have a thoughtful, well-prepared discussion about ADUs that fell flat on its face because people were not being open-minded and receptive to this. It is a greater problem that, as I presented to the study session, that there are many, many people in this city who do not want to have a change whatsoever from the way that the city looked and felt in 1964. And that is not fair. That is not selfish. The reality is change is inevitable. We live in a city that is growing very, very rapidly. And if we say we don't want City of Wheat Ridge to grow or to change or to look any different, then that means that you're telling everyone who has boomerang kids, those would be kids who move out of the house but then come back so they can finish secondary education. People who have total failure to launch kids. People who want to start a home-based business. People who have aging parents who are concerned that they need to have those parents nearby. People who have a whole lot of situations. You're telling them, no, you need to stay out. We're not compassionate or sympathetic to your situation. It's selfishness. And we need to address this issue head on. We need to talk about this to say, what is it that we want for our community so we don't keep having these things erupt, as we did with the ADU discussion, as we did here. This is a growing city. Water is increasingly becoming a problem. We're not being neighborly. Sprawl is ugly, and there could be legal action to this. I think we need to look at this also from the perspective of what is it that you and the Community Planning and Development Department want to do. Do you want to take a nuanced approach and go through every single detail of every single one of these proposed actions? I don't think that you have the resources to do it. My process of working with the zoning department was really quite wonderful, but it took a year for me to split my lot. That's a pretty big commitment, and I can't imagine that had I needed to come do this over and over and over again, that it would be appropriate for what you have on your plates, and it would be appropriate for everyone to have to get muddled up in this. I think that we can't expect people to say things need to fit in and have every person have a voice. And for people to be able to say, what is the most appropriate development for the neighborhood? I think instead we need to take a big step back and say, okay, what do we want to do in the future? And that doesn't mean that an overlay district doesn't make sense. That also doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at forms-based zoning. But to do a targeted action with this moratorium is very, very misguided, and I hope that you'll reconsider it and remove it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Chidley and Stephanie Garcia on deck.
My name is Chris Chidley, or Chidley, or Chigley, or Chiggly Wiggly, because nobody can get it right. And I live at 4020 Everett Street. I just have to pull up the original drive that we had. Sorry. I'll just have to speak without it. So we are looking for a solution to the moratorium that the council created. We, the citizens, we, the residents, we didn't create it. We just brought our thoughts and comments to you. I'd like to quote from chapter 26 of subdivision design. This has been repeated a couple of times, but I'm going to emphasize it. Flag lots are not encouraged, but are permitted when they are the most appropriate development option as determined by the community director, Ken Johnston. What is appropriate? The lot, if it suits the setbacks, the site requirements, the regulations, that's all compatible, but there is appropriateness to the size, to the area. There is the rear setback that we've talked about, which has been mentioned that, this neighborhood has rear yards. This lot will actually only have a 15-foot rear distance. That's from me to the gentleman over here. That's a back lot. The neighborhood is all about open views and trees, but the question is this lot appropriate again to the neighborhood? The streetscape, again, this is a neighborhood that has wide and deep streets and wide and deep front properties. The character, as I've repeated before from Envision Wheat Ridge, and although it has been stated that this neighborhood is not historic neighborhood, Bel Air is one of 3 neighborhoods as cited in Envision Wheat Ridge. Envision Wheat Ridge wants to preserve and highlight these neighborhoods because they are unique in quality, in streetscape, because of their, I'm sorry, did somebody say something? No? Because of their large, mature landscaping and the semi-rural character. Before this all started, my neighbor and I, Amy Burkett, met with the building director, Ken Johnston. And we had some comments from him. He was very upfront. I'll share these with you. The proposed subdivision was not what he would have encouraged. As again, the statement, flag lots are not encouraged but are permitted. that the developer kept on coming back with the subdivision layout that was questionable, but they continued. That he was not so supportive of this plan, but it met the zoning and setback requirements. I leave you with this last thought. If a corner, which has been repeated so many times, and forgive me for a second, I just need a picture. If a corner is to be the focus of the neighborhood, a house on a corner, therefore, would almost have to be the most important house. That house would have to be the star of the neighborhood. But maybe the star of the neighborhood is just the corner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephanie Garcia.
Thank you very much. I do want to address, as Lori Garcia said, a few misstatements and reiterate a few things as well. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I do want to address a few misstatements, as Lori Garcia indicated I would, and also specifically address some comments that were made, not necessarily misstatements, but just to illuminate some of the comments. I did use Envision Wheat Ridge and the 2017 housing survey to inform the design of my home. That's a rough depiction of it, and I guess I would want to point out that I purposefully kept the open space visible from the street in acknowledgement that that was a prominent corner. The fact that it faces two front streets actually creates a bit of a hardship in that I'm faced with two front setbacks, but I was still able to have gracious green space, preserve two mature trees, all while keeping the footprint under what I was permitted and the height under what I was permitted. So I just want to point out to you that you can see there's plenty of green space. You know, the red line, I assume, indicates the setbacks of the adjacent homes. If that map were to be moved further west, you'd see that there were plenty of homes that are actually closer to the street than the front of my new home. My setback is effectively 36 and a half feet from the street, and there are homes with as few as 22 feet, 25 feet, plenty of them under 30 feet, but even more under 36.5. So I'm not an outlier in my front setback, and I'm under my lot coverage. So I just want to point that out since that perfect graphic is right there. I don't see one of the graphics that the architect neighbor showed indicated that they'd be looking at two sides of houses, and she acknowledged that it really wasn't sited appropriately because it showed the new home fully on top of the lot, which is not the case. It's sunk under at about 7 feet. So the scale of what was shown is completely inaccurate and doesn't at all depict what would be viewed. I do want to recap because some people were not at the study session, but in advance of being notified of my subdivision approval, I did reach out to neighbors for their input, critique, and consultation. And yes, I sent one email, but that email was distributed to everybody who was on the original email from my neighbor to the west. I had no idea there was opposition. I had never talked to anybody about it. Nobody talked to me about it. So it was the best way I could reach people was to respond to the email that went out to the people expressing displeasure. I don't know who received it, how many received it, but I did send that out and it was distributed. I confirm that. I made another offer and testimony 3 weeks ago, and only one person followed up and asked me questions since then. And I answered those questions within 24 hours. I've contacted City Council and offered to share information, and I addressed the error-filled testimony of October 22nd at the study session on November 5th. It's true that I did not share my plans with people because I didn't feel like it was my place to share plans when I did not have the right to pursue new construction. The new construction came about when I was investigating, could I build, or how large of a detached garage could I build? It's like, oh, 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet? Okay, I keep looking through. I can build a home. I can build a home with the garage. Perfect. Brother Mark, what do you think? It all came together like that. It was quite organic, and there was no intended deceit in it. I didn't have coffee with neighbors and ask them what they were doing, and they asked me what I was doing. I'm not a social creature like that. So that didn't happen, and I think that the inference was made that I sat down and deliberately misled people, and I want to correct that because that did not happen. I think that my house, my single-family home on the approved lot, keeps being called a development. It's a single-family home on an infill lot. And I'm very aware of the Urban Land Institute. I've actually been asked to be part of the charrettes they produce, study groups. So I'm very aware of what good neighboring is and what a good developer does. This is not a development. This started out as a labor of love for me and my family. It's been turned into a business, so I'm going to approach this as a business. It didn't occur to me that I would have pushback or an issue to build a single-family home on a lot that is larger than several up on Field Drive. The setbacks are further than most of them on that circular area. It meets not just the letter of the law, but I believe the intent of character preservation, because that's what drives me. So I just want to leave you with that and let you know I've done the outreach, I've offered information. Nobody has come back to me asking to see my plans. So how interested are they in the plans if nobody has asked to see them? I gave opportunity to critique them, to consult with me on them in advance of me having approval. Nobody took me up on that. So I'll keep the lines open. I'm happy to entertain questions. I'll always respond, but it defies logic and the impassioned group here that nobody would actually want to see what's going on or sit down and talk to me about it. I don't understand that. So I'm a bit at a disadvantage because I don't know what the true concern is. And perhaps what's desired is simply to have the lot be empty without a home. But the fact is my subdivision has been approved, and I have plans to build a home. And it was stated in the study session that nothing going forward should be retroactive to what has been approved. That's how the moratorium, the reconsideration was put on this agenda, is that nothing's going to be retroactive anyway, so let's cut these people loose and then let's try to come up with a thoughtful approach. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all of the speakers that I have signed up. Is there anyone here tonight who has not spoken who would like to speak at this time from the public? No, ma'am. I'm sorry. We're going to. I'm sorry, ma'am. We will close the public comment on this. I will open it up to discussion from council. Mr. Matthews.
There's so many issues and so little time. This is a complicated issue. Back on the 22nd, I think, or wherever, I spent some time and created a speech because I wanted to stay well organized and present my thoughts in an orderly fashion. And I worked on a speech for about 2 hours and then said, it's not going to work. My first impassioned plea fell on some deaf ears, but also I needed to be able to respond to what I heard here tonight. So that's the approach I'm going to take, and it's partially is to respond. So there's a couple things going on here. Number first is that we keep being told that we have to change, and I resent that. I resent people coming here and telling us we have to change. If you don't like us, don't come here. I'll say that right from here, right now. We have some philosophies here in our city that we've been riding that horse since 1964, and I don't see any need to change. One of the things that came to mind to me was that I started out thinking, well, maybe with the NRS that's going on right now, we ought to come up with a new slogan for the city, and that's back to the future. Maybe we should be more like 1964 rather than 2164. That's the horse that got us halfway across the river, and even a farmer knows that you don't want to change horses in midstream. Legal action. Well, I've already had legal action served on me. The developer, and I'm going to assume it's a developer, served me with a CORA request. I don't know towards what end. That's, for those of you who don't know, it's the Colorado Opens Record Act. So I get to spend a lot of time reproducing anything I had and written materials I had on this, and I don't care. And I want to thank her for that because actually it helped me refocus. I had been distracted by other city issues. So it brought me back to this issue. As far as our action for tonight, and I don't know what the rush is to action to reverse the moratorium. My initial hope had been that we would all take this thing seriously and come up with more than just a knee-jerk reaction, but actually study and spend 90 days to try and figure out how we could make everybody happy. And I know compromise always leaves somebody unhappy a little bit, but that was the whole point of the moratorium, was to give us time. And apparently the consensus on council is now that, well, let's just forget it. It's going to go away. We have not even yet really approached what we should have as an effort to consider this situation and the effects going forward on what's happened here and what we need to do to alleviate that not happening again. That's why I'm against reconsidering the motion. Private property rights. There are a lot of private property rights here, and I understand the individual's private property rights, but everybody in that subdivision has private property rights and the right to try and protect their property as they believe they're doing now. They're not being outlandish. I personally believe that I have no clue what the 2014 council was doing when they created this administrative subdivision rule. I think it's an abomination. I think everybody should have a right to be informed officially of changes that are taking place in their neighborhood. And I have nothing against this particular one, but we need to address that situation. That was part of what the moratorium was supposed to do, was give us time to do that. I also believe that there is a good chance here. I don't believe that the right decision was made in granting the subdivision in the first place. I think a variance should have been called for. When I looked after getting the CORA request, I looked more into the specs and I see variance, a deviation from the strict application of the development standards contained in these regulations due to unusual or atypical site conditions or characteristics. Well, if we're talking about a subdivision that's got something that we don't encourage, I would consider that to be an unusual situation. And so I don't believe that we really as a city, followed all of our responsibilities out to give everybody remedy in this situation. If we had considered that a variance and opened the situation to public hearing in the first place, This all could have been hashed out before anybody was damaged at all or had any hard feelings. And it would have been done out in the open with full transparency, something we need more of. Use of a flag lot from our code. Is a lot design, use of a flag lot design is necessary for effective development of land. That's one of the 3 criteria that are met. The community director does have the right to make that decision, but it's one of 3 things he's to consider. And if it's something that we've already said we discourage, then perhaps I think a variance should have been called for, and that would have gotten a chance to get it out of this administrative loop and get it out to the people. And we could have addressed this, as usual, ahead of time instead of in arrears. And if someone wants to bring legal action, bring it. I didn't think we were down to that point yet where we were going to be starting to threaten everybody with legal action. I'm hoping that we could find some way to resolve this amicably. But like I said, I've already had a CORA request, so I guess the legal train has left the station. So bring it. I have nothing against anybody personally in this outcome. I'm trying to work for the best of the city and all of the residents. And I consider the homeowners of that property to be part of my constituents also. But it's always difficult here. How do you split the baby in half? You have a homeowner with rights, you have multiple homeowners with rights. How do we do that? That was the whole reason for this moratorium, was to give us time to thoughtfully consider that. And now all of a sudden we were able to, in 30 days, the only thing we could figure out to do was try and get rid of the moratorium instead of spending more time on discussing the situation. So shame on us. And I guess, well, I'm done for the night. I'm sorry. I'm just really disappointed in the way this whole thing's been handled from 2014 forward to this very minute. And it does not speak well of our city. I don't think it speaks well of the way the staff handled this particular case, and I don't think it speaks well of what we've done, perhaps even myself included. But I am definitely against voting on to stop the moratorium, and I'm certainly for taking another stab at trying to make this have a better outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy, and then Ms. Davis.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my comments short so you don't have to listen to my scratchy voice, but I am in support of overlay zonings or special districts or looking at different zonings. What I am not in support of is retroactively applying that to someone who has already gone through all of the processes and already has their approval. Change is a universal truth. And so for those who say, if you don't like change, don't come to our city, I would have to say, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, every day when we wake up, we're different and we've changed. So I would just like to say that I have no rights here to ask for a reconsideration, but I'm really hoping that out of the councilors that were here, that they will ask for a reconsideration, and I will be supporting that.
Ms. Davis?
All right, I'm going to keep it really short. Ribbit. So I just, from one clarification from Mr. Johnstone and Mr. Goff, we keep referring back to the 2014 action. If I recall correctly, the 2014 action was regarding 3-lot subdivision. Is that correct? I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but the 2-lot subdivision was always administratively, even before 2014. Is that correct?
Prior to 2014, and in 2014 again, we did a repeal and replace. So we totally rewrote the subdivision regulations, Article 4 of Chapter 26. But prior to 2014 and that repeal and replace, you could do consolidation plats of 2 lots, or you could do lot line adjustments. Those were the 2 administrative options. There were no multiple lot administratively approved subdivisions prior.
So I guess my question is, could it, I mean, let's pretend 2014 didn't happen. They still could have done other
Prior,
things
if
administratively.
2014 ordinance didn't happen, they would have gone to the planning commission based on the number of lots.
Okay. I just wanted some understanding on that. And then I also, being somebody who was here on the evening, we did the emergency one, which I was amazed that we sat here and did that on the fly. But I think one of our goals was, because we only heard one side, we only heard the opposing side. And I think that, I think we felt, at least I felt at that time, the action was, okay, let's give this time so that we could hear both sides of this situation. And I think also, that being said, that as a city, perhaps this is something that we need to look at, that, you know, more public comment needs to be involved in the future. But I was there, and I will ask for a reconsideration. And I do think a lot of it was so we could hear both sides of it, and for us to move forward on looking at how we might be able to do it differently so that everybody feels their voices are heard proactively instead of reactively in this situation was our goal. And I think ultimately one of our goals was to hear both sides in this situation, which I think we've done. And it sounds like we have somebody else we've affected with this moratorium that's gone through the process. And although many people aren't here, I'm sure City Council has seen, they've gotten many emails about kind of this, some of the themes of opposition of how could you change the rules midway? You know, they followed the rules. So I will be, if no one else will be making a motion, I will be making a motion for reconsideration.
Thank you. Additional comments? Mr. Fitzgerald.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We really appreciate hearing from you, and I acknowledge how sincerely you feel about this. And I acknowledge that it's a beautiful neighborhood and you want to keep it that way. I live very close. I live just south of the neighborhood you're talking about. But there are many, it's a bigger picture. There's a matter of law. Everybody wants the law to apply to everybody equally. It's really not fair of us to say, well, the coding law, the code requires that you do X, and then as soon as you do X, we say, no, I'm sorry, we decided different. That's just not fair. And as far as applying anything retroactively, we already had a couple lawsuits about that, in which the city won, using the logic that it was unconstitutional to apply the law retroactively. So in this case, I will be voting for reconsideration, and I am sorry that you feel at risk about that. I hope Ms. Garcia will take into consideration the feeling of the neighborhood, especially the side views of the house. But I've driven around the neighborhood many times trying to figure this out myself. And I think just from visual examination of the neighborhood, she's right that there are many houses that are closer to the street than hers will be. And she did meet the requirements of code, so now we really can't change our mind. The law should apply to her equally. So I will be voting for reconsideration.
Mr. Ann?
Thank you. Boy, there's a lot to think about, and I'm thinking about 2016 when citizens came to us regarding the bulk plane in District 1 on the east side. And all they wanted was to have their voices heard. All they wanted was for us to hear what mattered to them, because they're always and have always felt as if they are ignored, and they're little people, they're here and we're up here, which isn't the case, because we do work for you and we do represent you. I see both sides in this, but personally for me, I feel more conversation needs to take place. 90 days is really nothing in comparison to the fact that we have an NRS committee who is looking at ADUs, who is looking at overlaying for zoning areas, and we're giving them the 6 months to year to however much time they need to have these discussions and bring them back to us as to what the recommendations are. So I think asking for 90 days for both sides to meet, both sides to come up with a solution and a compromise that isn't going to make either side happy, but it's going to bring the community together, the neighborhood together. Let's listen to what they have to say. Let's figure out what we can do. I realize we're changing and we're just growing, and we want to. We want to change, we want to grow, we want to look at the future. At the same time, we need to hold on to some of our roots, and also to remember that we are a community, and we do need to talk with each other, and we just need to communicate and talk with each other as we move forward. So I'm going to support and keep true to the 90-day moratorium. I feel it's important. You can't just say, nope, we're not talking about this. Here's what we're going to do. And then we'll discuss this down the road, because down the road comes and we're in the same situation as we are now in District 1 on the east side with bulk plane and height restrictions. So thank you. I appreciate all your comments, everybody coming in. I heard what you had to say, and I really do hope the rest of you will allow them to have the 90 days and we can have those discussions moving forward. Thank you.
Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate that I am very thankful for all of you coming out and speaking your mind and allowing for us to hear your opinions. I think one of the most challenging things as being a city council member that I've found in the last year is how to reach the public in an adequate manner so that you feel heard. And Larry and I have had a couple neighborhood meetings that quite honestly fell flat. We only had a few people present. And I think that when you are fearful of a certain aspect, or you are upset with something that is coming down the pike, that you tend to be more engaged and more involved. In fact, that's how I became involved in Wheat Ridge politics specifically. I understand a lot of the apprehensions that we are facing with our city, and the growing and the changing, and how uncomfortable that can be. I've stated before, and I will state again, that my support of the moratorium was not a support of retroactively imposing certain laws or legislation. I agree that subdividing a single-family lot should have public input. I don't think it's fair to subdivide a single-family home that we typically envision as having one home, one family on, and then turning it into two, which is, in my mind, more of a multifamily unit than a single family. So I understand your anger and apprehension of that kind of a plan. I am also not for undermining a legal process that is already in place and on the books that is costly to go through as a citizen. And quite frankly, if we were to impose any legislation moving forward retroactively, there could be lawsuits that would ensue. And I think it sets a poor precedent for our public and what they can expect to go through in a public process, and how we apply law to all of us equally. I am not going to support the reconsideration of the moratorium, and the reason why is because we are already 30 days into it. We only have 60 days more. I don't think that continuing to have a conversation about what it would look like moving forward so that this does not happen again, whether that be a public hearing input process for subdividing 2 lots, and whether that comes or goes to Planning Commission, which it sounds like it previously had, and then potentially comes to council and allows for the transparency and for those of you to speak and be heard. I will tell you that I came in here tonight supporting the reconsideration because I do think it is unfair to hold up a process that was legally procured. But I want to consider that moratorium and the reasons why I supported that to begin with, and that was to have a conversation. That does not mean that we will retroactively impose these and that this plan cannot move forward come January. It likely will, because she did go through the process that we put in place and she was held to and went through. But I hear you and I appreciate you guys coming out here, so I'm going to allow that conversation to continue for 60 more days.
Mr. Pond?
Thank you. I will repeat a thanks to everyone who's come out tonight and to the previous meetings, and I'm going to try to work through some messy notes that I have here. Rachel Holteen mentioned that this was one of the more complicated issues that's come up in several years that she's been following this. I agree with that, and I'm just going to tell you, what I think, for me, is hard about this and perhaps representing some of the things that are hard about the work that we have to do. Personally, one of the hard things is the assumptions that I or we don't care about this city or its heritage or its beauty, where you live or where I live. I suppose by tonight's standards, I live in the second most beautiful neighborhood in the city, Paramount Heights, but also one of the 3 that was mentioned in Vision Wheatridge. Unfortunately, tonight I learned that we don't have curvy streets in Paramount Heights. I thought we did. You do? Apparently, there's some curvy issues that need to be straightened out. But it is hard to sit up here and listen repetitively to the assumption that we don't care, that I don't care. We disagree on things for sure, and we perhaps approach things differently. I love this city. That's why I moved here. It's not a surprise, I hope. That's why a lot of people make decisions to move into communities. I love my Paramount Heights neighborhood and its character. And I know why you love yours, exactly, because I've been there, and I know exactly what you're talking about. You know what else is hard? Balancing the needs, the expectations, and the rights. All of these things have come up tonight. And that's really hard. It's not easy. A lot of times we are overwhelmed by, seemingly by one side of it. I do want to let everyone know, it's been said, we have to balance input as well. Not just people who come and speak tonight at the microphone, but calls and emails and other correspondence that are out there. And we get those, and we may not say it enough, but that is a part of the documentation and the feedback and the input that comes to us. Certainly is something that I use or try to use to help balance how I'm looking at it. I also get to bring my own experience and my own brain to the table. That's why you voted for us, I think, to represent a workload that you don't have time or the desire to spend Monday nights, Thursday nights, Saturday, whatever nights working on. You know what else is hard? What are the best ways to approach change? How do we move into the future? That's hard. It's really not an easy thing, and although this may be one of the more difficult things, we've been in this room talking about these things, hard topics, for a long time and having these hard discussions. And we don't always get it right. I will acknowledge that. I was here in 2014. I was on the planning commission before I was sitting up here in 2011. I haven't gotten everything right. And I've tried to own, as an individual and as a member of a body, I've tried to own those things and to do the best I can and to acknowledge failability and mistakes along the way. And I am tonight. Perhaps some of the things that were done and the nuances of the 2014 changes weren't all correct, and I think we're hearing that. So let me step back. On October 8th was the first time that this came in my notes to this committee, and I think Mr. Chidley and Nancy Vanderbilt came up and spoke on the 8th, and I have notes from that. And I will go back and look at the video, and I hope someone else will. There was a balanced approach to what I was hearing that night. They were very concerned about us looking at the code, looking at the zoning, and trying to understand how we could, talk about this and make some changes. There was an acknowledgement at that point about the rights and the process that the property owner went through, and I believe that both of those individuals acknowledged that it's likely we cannot go backwards and take away the rights that have been processed. However, we want to look forward and make sure that we're looking at these things carefully in order to honor all of the things that were said that night and all the subsequent nights that you guys have showed up. I have zero disagreement with that, absolutely none. I think it's important for us to do this and to have heard all of the things that you've said and what you're going to say in the future as you continue to be involved, whether it's coming here or going to NRS meetings or whatever it is. And we should hear you and we should try to acknowledge it. I do not believe that ending this moratorium means that we should stop talking about this. We have a commitment, and I own that commitment as one of 8, to continue to talk about this and represent the things that you have asked for all this night and on previous nights. We shouldn't stop talking about it, and I don't think anyone's suggesting that we should. As a matter of fact, I think that we owe both sides here something, and this is how I look at it. I think we owe, the sides of the property, the property owner and the people who are either affected by this moratorium to unencumber those rights and to allow them to move forward. I think it's already been stated, and I would agree that regardless of the term of the moratorium, I don't think it's fair to go back on those processes and retroactively change them. So I at least personally won't be doing that. But I think we've already heard that there's actual cost and something to consider to unencumber those affected at this time. Now, that is not to say that the other side is unaffected, and you are, and we've heard that. I feel like we have a responsibility to honor everything you've asked for and to look at whether it's notification, corrections in the code related to the things in 2014, whether it's picking up and doing Envision, all together, or even changing Chapter 26. And I think we should do any and all of that makes sense in order to create the stability and consistency in your neighborhood or my neighborhood or anywhere else that we might consider changing the way the processes have worked. And again, I live in, let's say it's tied for first best neighborhood in the city, and I think I will obviously have an interest, and so will my neighbors, in showing up and being a part of that. We should be expeditious about that to the extent we can. And although it seems often like we don't work very quickly, there's a lot of things to consider, and I at least promise to show up where needed and or to talk about it here when needed, and to go through it quickly as we can and try to dovetail in the things like the NRS and your comments and make those changes. So again, I think we owe both sides. I think it's fair to reconsider this in order to unencumber an encumbrance that we've created that I don't think we probably intended exactly to create, and yet I don't think that's incongruent with listening and responding and taking action on everything that you've said as it relates to changing our code, changing the way we notice, changing the way we create public process.
Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, this is a very difficult situation and conflict, and there's no easy way out of this. And I can see situations where we could be sued on either side of this. So, you know, the role of a city council member shouldn't be hindered or impaired by the threat of litigation. I think in some ways, if we're doing our job right, we're going to be sued. That's just the nature of the work that we do. And so, as much as people might, you know, assume that that's a threat, I don't think that that's an appropriate way to go about dealing with matters. But it does come to that, and we are currently experiencing several lawsuits unrelated to issues that we're discussing here. So that being said, as we look at the current property and the subdivision that was made, I can't help but look at this and see it as very black and white in the sense that subdivision approval was made under the color of the law as written at the time when it was submitted. And for us to pull the rug out from underneath that administrative subdivision, I think would rightfully open us up to a significant amount of liability. So in that regard, I don't know, and in fact, in talking with the city attorney, it appears as though we really don't have a way, administratively, legislatively, or otherwise, to retroactively unsubdivide a lot, to erase that line. Whatever the current owner chooses to do with that property, that's their prerogative, that's the basis of private property rights. That being said, this issue of flag lots, I can agree that the administrative subdivision and the code and everything else points to the fact that flag lots are not appropriate. There may be some veracity to this issue of this subdivision not, you know, necessarily meeting all those requirements, and I can understand those concerns. But as we look at this greater issue, I think that the administrative subdivision process does have its flaws. Allowing the staff to make these decisions does put a fairly large amount of weight in their hands as to, you know, what the outcome might be. But as it relates to us operating and running our city and trying to do the best job we can for all parties involved, we have to understand that in my mind, that there isn't much we can do about this particular subdivided lot. However, we can take steps to prevent this from happening in the future. And I do have several amendments that could be made to this current ordinance, and I had a couple questions for the city attorney, and whether or not any amendment to this moratorium would cause it to continue along that 60-day time frame, or would it re-up the 90 days if we made amendments to that, and or would we need to issue a new ordinance in order to get another 90 days on that ordinance?
Sure, a couple of things. Emergency ordinances may only be effective for 90 days, so that's why you've got 90 days on this one. In order to extend the moratorium, the council would have to act by regular ordinance, first reading, second reading, and get that done before January the 20th, which is actually a Sunday, so it'd have to be, your second reading would have to be January the 14th. So were you to choose to extend the moratorium, you'd have to do that by first reading, second reading, public hearing ordinance to extend it.
Okay. So the amendments that I was considering making would be to, and I don't know if this is possible as well, to amend the title of the ordinance. Is that, or is the title unamendable?
Well, you could amend the title, but again,
I have other amendments beyond that, but I just wanted to start there.
As an emergency ordinance, you can amend an emergency ordinance. You'd have to make it immediately effective. It'd have to be an emergency ordinance itself. When you think about it, if otherwise you'd be running a regular ordinance to amend this one. And if the idea were to extend the ordinance or extend the moratorium, the sort of straightforward way to do that would have to be a regular ordinance for second reading. I don't think I'm answering the question you're asking.
No, so basically I have several amendments that I would like to make to the ordinance that necessarily wouldn't extend the ordinance beyond its current expiration date. But I was just curious as to whether or not the title of that ordinance can be amended, as well as several items, or language in the current moratorium.
Sure.
So under consideration, can we amend the ordinance?
Oh, I see. Well, if you were to move to if the motion for reconsideration passed, then you've taken yourself back to the point in time before the emergency ordinance was adopted. Then you have a range of choices. One would be to move to adopt an emergency ordinance that does other things. Another, of course, would be to postpone indefinitely the proposed ordinance. I don't think you have a door number 3, which is to amend, because really when you're reconsidering, you're moving back in time to before you actually adopted the ordinance. So you don't have one to amend, but if you wanted a different version of it, the way to do that would be move to reconsider, then a motion to adopt an emergency ordinance that did this, this, and this. And if that passes, then fine.
Okay. So basically, if we were to reconsider this ordinance and we were to then introduce a new emergency ordinance, my suggestion would be to strike the word building permit and replace it with administrative subdivision within the title. And then within the third whereas clause, strike the language as it reads, the issuance of building permits for single-family residence within. And then under section 1, strike building permits for construction of single-family residences within the R1 zone district within. So by removing those items from the current ordinance, we would allow a moratorium to remain in place on administrative subdivisions that necessarily would not apply to this current property. It would apply to properties who have applied for administrative subdivision from the time that this emergency ordinance were to go into effect, and that would give us the time to address these issues of flag lots and the like. So I think that would be, it's not going to win over the majority of the neighbors in this situation. However, in order to keep this from happening in other situations and other properties, I think we need to take the time to review the administrative subdivision process, and I think that would accomplish that.
Mr. Pond.
Just to carry out and make sure that I understand your response to his previous question, if we move to reconsider, and then you're saying that we actually have a second step here, which is to move to postpone indefinitely ordinance 1656. Does that not leave us the option to, as opposed to postpone indefinitely, to amend? It seems like by the basis of having this second motion that we have to take up, that in fact we are doing something to the ordinance. In this case, postponing indefinitely. So I guess I would want to make sure that we're really clear that it would be out of order to amend, and because I think that's to be clear what Councilmember Urban is asking.
And I absolutely follow that, and I think what he's wanting to do is to emerge, when all the dust settles, with an emergency ordinance that placed a moratorium on administrative subdivisions. And you can do that. The suggestion I have for how you would do that, though, is not to amend this ordinance, and here's the reason why. When you reconsider, you've gotten in a time machine back to the point in time at which you had adopted nothing. So you don't have anything to amend. You don't have an ordinance to amend. You're back in the spot where you've adopted nothing, but because you had previously adopted this ordinance, now you've got to do something with it. So you either you postpone it indefinitely, or you re-adopt it. If you were to re-adopt it, again, time machine, we're back in that meeting where I'm furiously trying to write an ordinance, And we would do that again, basically, and we'd emerge with an ordinance that would be a lot like this one, but with the terminology switched out. Let me be clear that the impact of that, if that were to all happen, I don't have an opinion on how you should vote, but if that were to all happen, then you'd have a moratorium on administrative subdivisions going forward. And it would be sort of a new ordinance, so you could trigger a new 90 days because it would be a new ordinance. But importantly, you would no longer have a moratorium on the issuance of building permits in previously approved administrative subdivisions. And so Ms. Garcia would be able to come in tomorrow and apply for a building permit for that structure. I want to make sure you know that would be a consequence. Okay.
So, is there, if I'm hearing you right, we would move to reconsider, move to postpone, which gets that cleared out, and then move to enact an emergency ordinance with essentially a different with Zach's language, and that would either stand for 90 days, or I assume we could issue it for 60 if we wanted.
You could,
okay.
given the kind of changes, given the work you're needing, and by virtue of the fact that Chapter 26 requires recommendation from Planning Commission, separate hearing there, 90 days is tight, to begin with. I suppose you could do something sort of complicated like readopting Ordinance 2016 with the following amendments, which is, I think, where Councilmember Urban was headed. I think that probably would work. I'm sorry for kind of thinking on the fly, but it's an unusual situation that allows you to keep the ordinance title. But again, time machine, you've gone back to the point in time before you've adopted anything. So I think I'd be a little more comfortable with well, of course, if you were going to let's say you wanted to just affirm this ordinance, you'd be readopting it. I guess there's probably no problem with readopting it with following amendments. The net result, if it passes, is that you would have an ordinance in place that now is a moratorium on future. I think here's the difference. Sorry to be thinking through this on the fly, but you wouldn't be able to get 90 days if you're amending this ordinance, because an emergency ordinance by charter can only last for 90 days. An amended emergency ordinance is still that same ordinance number 1625 or 1656, and it's only good for 90 days no matter how much you amend it. So if you want to re-up for 90 days to do this work, then you would need to do three things: move to reconsider, move to postpone indefinitely 1656, move to approve a new ordinance that does these things. If you want to be very careful and make sure you get that new ordinance in place before you turn loose of the moratorium ordinance, you could save the postponing of it indefinitely, until after you'd put this other one in place. Does that help? Is that reasonably clear? Okay.
Mr. Matthews.
And I think you have reminded us in the past too, and you'd mentioned some difficulty in getting a change to Chapter 26 done in 90 days, that there is the possibility that we could actually adopt, we've done this before, in 90 days, adopt a new emergency moratorium regarding the new moratorium on subdivisions. So that would give us 180 days then to work out the wrinkles on doing work on Chapter 26.
If I may interrupt you just for a second, you could do that, but because emergency ordinances can only last for 90 days, yes, you could adopt a new emergency ordinance, but it would have to be a different kind of one, because the charter says it shall not be adopted again unless by regular ordinance.
Didn't we do something with the moratorium that lasted more than 90 days on the emergency the emergency?
I think what you did was you adopted a regular ordinance while the 90 days was running, because you've got time to do it. During that 90 days, you just go through a first and second reading on a regular ordinance, and then you buy us all the time you want. So
But you're telling us that to do that, we have to go through planning commission on this case?
No, that's planning commission is just to actually amend the code.
Okay.
A moratorium ordinance is one that you just do here.
Okay.
So that's no problem. The reason I was saying you might need more than 90 days to get the code work done is because that goes to planning commission. But the point being, if you buy yourself 90 days on a administrative subdivision revision ordinance, during that 90 days, you've plenty of time to do a regular ordinance extending the time for you to get that work done.
While I have the floor, I'd just like to thank everybody that's here tonight. I'm the resident grumpy old man, so forgive me if I get passionate, but that's the way I am. But I'd also like to remind all of my fellow council members here that I do listen to what you say, and I do appreciate all your comments. And there have been times when you have changed my mind on items in the middle of the stream. And I just appreciate the consideration everyone's giving to how to try and remedy the situation so that, you know, this idea of changing to a subdivision moratorium, I think is a good idea, and I would support that.
So how do we like to proceed? What's the...
If I can make a suggestion, obviously first you need to see if reconsideration is going to happen at all, if you get in the time machine or not, because if you don't, we're done, here for tonight. If you do that, if you do vote to reconsider, it'd be my request that you take a short recess so that we can make sure that language you would want to come up with, and Zach's got the language, but we want to make sure that okay, who's that going to scoop in, and what kind of, what sort of externalities will that, have? And rather than kind of guessing of the language, which we did pretty well, we got pretty close, but I don't want to have that kind of luck twice in a row, and I think a 10-minute recess would really help. Then we can come back and take motions that postpone indefinitely and that adopt new stuff. So the first order of business is probably the consideration of whether or not you're going to take the first motion there to reconsider and do the time machine.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you that have come out here tonight to speak on this issue. I think you've been very articulate. You've been very courteous and respectful to the speakers that are here. There are many speakers who were not able to come on Monday nights, and Mr. Pond alluded to the fact that we get other communication from residents and citizens who are not able to make it. But all of those inputs are valuable. I hope that we've conducted a process whereby everyone feels like they got to be heard. And I know that somebody got to be heard twice, and I did that because I thought, in fairness, we could do it. And I hope that everyone walks out of here and realizes that we conducted a fair process, and it's fair and open, and that's the way that I hope that all of the business that we conduct in our city is here. I also want to sort of go back and circle back to when we, on November 5th, at a study session, made a consensus among council to reconsider this issue. And at the time that we made a consensus by unanimous vote of the council to reconsider this issue, we also made a consensus to move forward with new options about how the city might balance properly the neighborhood rights to help provide more input from community and neighbors on proposed design issues such as this. And that passed unanimously. So this council has committed itself to go back and to study this issue. Now, I got to tell you that I got a little lost in the discussion between Mr. Urban and Mr. Dahl about additional moratoriums on actions. I'm not particularly a fan of that, But it's the will of the, if that's the will of the council, that's the will of the council. But there has been a consensus, and I will, we will find the time in the near future to sit down and discuss these issues because there has been a change since 2014. And this issue was decided by administrative action because that was the law that we enacted, pure and simple. So, but I would like to thank you all for coming, and thank you for the discussion we've had.
So do we need to make a motion to reconsider?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Fitzgerald for a motion.
Second page of the staff report. Page 2 of the staff report.
Pardon?
Page 2 of the staff report.
Yeah, I know that, but Chris.
It'd be the first motion on that page.
Well, Ms. Davis, would you please make a motion?
Sure. I move to reconsider Ordinance 1656, an ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the acceptance, processing, and approval of certain building permits and declaring an emergency.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Would the clerk please poll the council?
Be appropriate to ask for a 10-minute recess so we can discuss
I know.
if it's the will of the council to do that. But if we're going to move forward, we really need to be able to talk about it.
Does that require a motion?
Well,
No, that's up to the chair.
I'm ready to move to item number 10 on the
I needed
agenda,
after that.
or number 11 on the agenda.
Yeah, we have to.
We have to do the amendment.
Well, the problem, I mean, at this point, you've moved to reconsider, so you can't just sort of not do anything more.
Okay.
You know, now you're in the time machine and you were obliged to do something with Ordinance 1656. Postpone it indefinitely and stop there, postpone indefinitely, do something else.
Is there a following motion?
Do you need your 10 minutes?
Well,
We want to do that now.
we don't need 10 minutes to postpone 1656 indefinitely, but we definitely need 10 minutes if there's to be a proposal for a new emergency ordinance.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Urban?
I'd like to request a 10-minute recess to consult with the city attorney regarding a new moratorium on administrative subdivisions.
Okay, we'll stand recess for 10 minutes. reconvene the meeting. And I would like to go to our Council, Mr. Dahl.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have the recess. What I know that Councilmember Urban wants to do is to propose a separate ordinance, emergency ordinance imposing a 90-day moratorium on the acceptance and processing approval of administrative subdivisions under Code Section 26406 within the Bel Air subdivision. So really limiting administrative subdivision review, or putting that on hold, a moratorium on that for the available 90 days. And that would be the new ordinance. And when we're ready for that, I can read you through the existing ordinance 1658 and show you where the changes would be, I think, to accomplish that. I realize that's his desire, and it would seem to me the appropriate order of events, since you did the reconsideration of ordinance 1656, and you have yet to do something with it, it'd be appropriate to do as follows: to take the second motion on the staff report, which postpones that ordinance indefinitely, and that's the moratorium on building permits, so that is done, and then be appropriate to grant Councilmember Urban the floor for the purpose of making a motion for a separate emergency ordinance, which of course would have to pass by the requisite majority of the entire council, so 5 votes. So that's what I would suggest you do. You take care of ordinance 1656 first, and then move on to what kind of new moratorium regime on administratively approved subdivisions in Bel Air you want to put in place, so that you can take the time to look at code changes.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'm happy to do so.
Would you do so, Ms. Davis?
I move to postpone indefinitely ordinance 1656, an ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the acceptance, processing, and approval of certain building permits, and declaring an emergency for the following reasons. That we will be creating a new emergency ordinance that outlines more about subdivisions and not building permits.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please poll the council? All right, should we move on to the next item? Mr. Urban.
Thank you. I'd like to propose an emergency ordinance regarding administrative subdivisions, and I'd like for the city attorney to read that into the record.
Okay. Do we have an ordinance number?
It'd be 1661.
1661. Okay. I think an appropriate motion would be to adopt ordinance number 1661. The title would be an ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the acceptance, processing, and approval of administrative subdivisions within the Bel Air subdivision, and declaring an emergency. If you're looking at current ordinance 1656, which has just been postponed indefinitely, it would be that ordinance with the following changes. The first 2 whereas clauses would remain the same, and the third whereas clause would read: the council now wishes to impose a moratorium upon the acceptance, processing, and approval of administrative subdivisions under Code Section 26406 within the Bel Air subdivision, in order to consider adoption of regulations to address the procedure for review of administrative subdivisions under Code of Laws 26406B. In the Section 1 of the ordinance, it would read: the council hereby imposes a temporary moratorium upon the acceptance, processing, and approval of administrative subdivisions under Code Section 26-406 within the Bel Air subdivision, period. City staff is directed to refuse to accept for filing, not to further process or review any pending applications or requests for such subdivisions during the moratorium period. The duration section would remain The same with the exception that it should say the ordinance shall terminate 90 days from adoption hereof, so that I don't have to guess at what the calendar would say. But that would be 90 days from tonight. The section 3 would read exactly the same way it presently reads now. Questions about that?
Point of order, yeah, if I may.
Yes.
Just to avoid having to amend or re-amend stuff later, it was my impression that we were going to enact this for the whole city and not just the Bel Air subdivision. Since we've agreed that it's a terrible piece of legislation code to start with, and I was anticipating that it would be citywide.
Well, we haven't got the motion on the table yet, so...
Probably the right procedure would be for Councilmember Urban to so move, and if there's a second, then we can have that discussion. You can hear also from staff, because there was discussion at the recess around what the scope of the moratorium should be.
So move ordinance 1661 as referenced by the city attorney.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to enact a temporary moratorium. Now, Ms. Matthews, would you like to speak to that?
Before I ask for an amendment there, I will ask for some discussion on why that was not citywide, as several of us were anticipating it would be.
Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, in talking with the city attorney as well as Ken Johnstone, the concern was that by making the emergency ordinance apply across the entire city, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. The larger lots within neighborhoods like Bel Air have a greater shot at being subdivided than smaller lots that even if you subdivide it, you wouldn't have the setbacks and the like to be able to place another home in that. I don't know that there may be other neighborhoods that have similar lot sizes to Bel Air, but as it relates to this particular issue, the genesis of this issue was in the Bel Air neighborhood, and the changes that we make might be applicable to other neighborhoods, but in order to limit the type of collateral damage that we've experienced with other individuals, I'm trying to limit the impact of the moratorium while still trying to adhere to the spirit of the moratorium.
I don't understand. We have all agreed here that anytime any lots are subdivided, there should be a public hearing, and that the neighborhood should be given notice, and whether it's in Bel Air or if it's in one of my neighborhoods out where there's big lots out north of 44th, or in the rest of the western side of Weird, there's a lot of big lots out there, Fairmont or wherever. Why would we not want to avoid going through this again where all of a sudden someone gets a subdivision and the neighborhood's up in arms? And even if someone's splitting another lot for some other reason, if it's a smaller, I mean, we've all agreed that there should be a public process where the neighborhood gets to participate. And I don't see the difference here and why this wouldn't want to be citywide. Thank you.
Ms. Hoppy?
I would say that we have all agreed that we need to review our processes and make some potential changes, and that those potential changes may apply to some neighborhoods, it may apply to several neighborhoods, it may apply to no neighborhoods, but I wouldn't say that we all have agreed that there has to be a public process for a subdivision on a lot. I think that the spirit in which Mr. Urban, Councilmember Urban, is making this, where he's attempting to address the situation and not cause collateral damage further on down the road, is the right way to go, and I'll be supporting his new ordinance.
Additional discussion on the Mr. Pond.
Well, I won't repeat it. I'll just say that I agree with Councilmember Hoppy's interpretation of where I'm at with that as well. And I think if it's any more expansive than this, I won't support it. And even this is a little bit I'm a little bit cautious about it, and I think maybe I'm still in the decision-making process, so maybe some other people can speak to it. But just looking how we went through the emergency moratorium and then converting it to an actual ordinance, and there's I don't know, this isn't the right word, but there's a clunkiness to it that I think is disruptive to the normal course of business and discussion, which we have been talking about, which is that we need to do our business. We need to figure out how to change this code, whether that's bringing in the NRS or these other things. I think it's hard for us to say how long that'll take. And so when inside of this 90 days, what's going to happen is we're going to have to bring this back up. We're going to have a first reading and a second reading on a permanent ordinance. We're going to be debating the scale and scope of that, both in time and in geography, I think. And I don't know if that time that we're going to be doing that is time well served, and whether or not we're even going to get the duration right of it. So I'm cautious about even about this amendment, this motion. I would definitely not support the amendment to go to the whole city. As I stated in my previous comments, I think we have to try to get through this, and we've been talking about that. And I don't want to see anything happen like this. I will say that since 2014, this is my first recollection of being in a room like this discussing this, and so that at least gives me some notion that that the sensitivity, the buttons that were pressed, of sensitivity in this issue have not been consistent or something that we have seen often since 2014. I think, in fact, this may be really the first time that it's come to our attention at this level. So I will sit and listen. I wouldn't support an amendment to increase this, and I may not even support this, only because I think we can go do our work that we need to do without unduly jeopardizing another issue like this, if we are expeditious in doing what we've said we were going to do, as we talked about it in the study session, et cetera.
Additional discussion, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Right now, this issue applies to the Bel Air neighborhood. So I see the logic of that, but I am in general against enacting anything that applies only to a specific circumstance or a specific neighborhood. So I'm afraid I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of this, and I'll have to consider whether I'm going to vote yes or no. But I really don't think we had to do anything that applies only to a specific case.
Additional discussion, Ms. Dozman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel that the scope is a little too narrow. I think that there are many other neighborhoods, specifically in District 4, that have large lots that could be subdivided. I wouldn't necessarily consider, I'm going to support this in any manner, but I think that if we were to apply it to single-family lots or residential or certain types, I think that may be more appropriate. But I'm hesitant to specify this towards one neighborhood, because I think that was the issue with the targeted emergency moratorium to begin with, is that we were reactively deciding to impose a moratorium because of one issue. And so I think that maybe the scope should be larger, as far as, not administratively subdividing any single-family lots.
Mr. Matthews.
I move to amend the motion and replace the words Bel Air neighborhood with entire city of Wheat Ridge.
Second.
Okay, so there is an amendment and a second by Mr. Fitzgerald. Is there discussion on the amendment? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll speak a little bit more clearly about the reason why the Bel Air neighborhood was chosen for this emergency ordinance, and I think it goes to the amount of effort and rigmarole and difficulty that this neighborhood has had to go through up to this point, and knowing that this is a valid issue, this is a valid concern. The subdivision in this neighborhood has already occurred. By our attorney's advice, there's nothing that the city can do without threat of litigation to be able to crawl that back. And so, as in many ways an olive branch to this specific neighborhood, to give them this moratorium, I think is a good way to try to resolve the issue that derived this particular concern. So, as it relates to the entire city of Wheat Ridge, making this moratorium apply to the entire city, I don't think that would be fair to every individual that's looking to subdivide for whatever reason. But I think it would be fair to put a timeout on this particular neighborhood because they've already gone through a subdivision that was less than desirable by a majority of the neighbors. And for that reason alone, I think that's why this particular moratorium works. It's not to say the outcome of this moratorium is only applicable to the Bel Air neighborhood. It's that hopefully the outcome of this moratorium is we have a chance to sit and review and study the administrative subdivision process for the entire city. But I think if we do not pass this moratorium, it's plausible that another lot in the Bel Air subdivision could go through this exact same process. And as I said before, it's somewhat of an olive branch to that neighborhood to say we can't fix this one, but until we get our ducks in a row, we're not going to let it happen again. So that would be my reason for having this to be a specific neighborhood versus the entire city.
Additional discussion on the amendment. Ms. Duran.
I understand your intent, and I know we need to, Bel Air is what brought this to our attention, but I'm also thinking not necessarily citywide, but maybe lots that are, 12,000 square feet. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a compromise here. I know in my neighborhood, our lots there are over 12,000 square feet. So I just want to be mindful that we're not coming back here in 90 days or in between the 90 days, another neighborhood or neighbor is coming up with the same issue. That's my only concern is, well, we're going to do this. Let's do it right and have the conversations over the next 90 days regarding the administrative decisions, and let's just put that on hold. I support what you're doing, and I'll support that, but I'm just trying to look at the bigger picture here.
Additional discussion on the amendment.
I guess I have a question. Are we not, I'm just going to say it because I'm thinking it. Are we excluding it because I guess my thing is do we have somebody else that's in the process that we don't want to hinder? I'm just calling it out.
Mr. Johnstone?
Yeah, I would say that I couldn't put a number to it, Ms. Davis, but I would say that there definitely are minor subdivisions that would currently be eligible for administrative review that have probably gone through the pre-application meeting process, which is the precursor to being able to apply to subdivide your property. So I would suggest that a citywide application would likely impact some properties that are in review. If I might, the other reason why we, in speaking with Mr. Urban, kind of came to that recommendation of focusing on the Bel Air is if you just get rid of the ability to process any administrative subdivisions for some period of time, currently being suggested at 90 days, that means that anyone that's going to have a 3-lot or less subdivision is just on hold. Right, so we can't say, well, we're just going to trigger a planning commission meeting or some other public process. So I'm hearing your intent of at least several of your discussions tonight is that you may be uncomfortable with the level of administrative approval, and we can certainly look at code amendments that could adjust that in certain ways. But if you adopt it citywide for some period of time, it will impact people that are otherwise going through potentially a relatively straightforward 3-lot or less subdivision. We can't just say, well, we'll just give you a planning commission hearing. That's not how the code is written. So we just want to be mindful of you understanding that will have a real world impact on a certain class of people.
And Mr. Johnstone, just for clarity, we have by consensus directed staff to bring us study material to discuss these issues, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we had 5 options for you at the November 5th meeting that we, kind of threw out there as straw men. I don't think we got clear direction on any of those, that one of those seemed like a good option, right? I mean, I think the direction was, let's keep talking about all of them, but we're not, actively working on any one of those. So, I mean, I would feel that another study session would be needed for us to take any substantive direction in any of those different options or other options, because those certainly aren't the only ones.
Mr. Matthews.
It would be my intent that we just do away with the 1 to 3 administrative and just have the 2 categories, major and minor, and the 3-lot categories would go into the minor and go through the process that a 5-lot goes through right now. But here we are again. We're saying, well, we can't enact anything now because somebody's in process or somebody might be in process. 6 months from now, that's not going to change. Somebody might now be in process, and no, we can't enact it then because we're going to upset that apple cart. It will never happen. If we kick the can down the road, it will just go on and on and on forever. That's why we need to take the Band-Aid off right now, and maybe it hurts for a few seconds, but we don't need to draw this out for months or maybe years.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
I think Mr. Johnstone's comment illustrates the basic unfairness of applying to one neighborhood and not others. Are we picking winners and losers and saying that this group of people, the code doesn't apply or the moratorium doesn't apply, but this group, it does apply? It's basically unfair.
Additional discussion on the amendment. Okay, so the amendment is to change essentially Bel Air to the whole city. Will the clerk please poll the council on the amendment?
Motion fails 5-3 with Davis, Pond, and with Matthews, Dozman, and Duran voting yes.
Okay, so the amendment fails, so we are back to discussion on the motion. Is there more discussion on the motion? Ms. Davis.
I would just, I don't know if it's discussion, but I would like to see this on the next study session so that we can move quickly on a decision from a citywide perspective.
Additional discussion on the motion. Will the clerk please poll the council?
What is this on?
This is the motion the motion that was drafted by our attorney.
To adopt a new emergency ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium, 90 days, on processing of administrative subdivisions in the Bel Air subdivision.
Okay, would the clerk please clear the screen, and is everyone square on what the motion is? Please poll the council.
Motion carries 6-2 with Fitzgerald and Pond voting no.
Okay. Do we have any more business to conduct on item number 10? Then we will move to item number 11. This is the motion to elect a mayor pro tem. Each year, the city council members nominate and elect by majority vote a mayor pro tem who serves until their successor is elected. The election is conducted according to Section 3B of the City Council Rules of Order and Procedure. And the first rule is that the presiding officer will announce that the floor is open for nominations for the position of Mayor Pro Tem, and I so open the floor. Mr. Pond.
I'd like to nominate Councilmember Janice Hoppy.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews.
I would like to nominate Councilman Zach Urban.
Mr. Urban. Are there further nominations from the council? All right, then we will close the nominations. Each nominee will have the opportunity to address the council. So we will start with Ms. Hoppy. Would you like to address the council?
Just really quickly, I'd like to say that I'm honored and excited for the opportunity to potentially serve our city and my team members here in City Council in the position of Mayor Pro Tem. I am a skilled scheduler. I've spent many years of my life doing scheduling, and I spent a lot of years running meetings on different boards of directors, and so I think that I would be a capable and able team member to assist you in this position.
Thank you. Mr. Urban, would you like to address the council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree that whoever the council picks will do a good job, and I would just say that in my defense, my ability to understand parliamentary procedure, my ability to assist in running a meeting and providing clarity as it relates to the rules and the procedures of council, given the fact that I've been here for going on 6 years, I know the lay of the land and the ability to provide a quick and effective judgment relative to a parliamentary question or what may come is important. And so as a Mayor Pro Tem, I would do my best to both run an efficient meeting if you're not here, but also make sure that our calendar is up to date and that we have a good, clean schedule moving forward. And in my professional life, I do oversee and administer various committees and meetings across the country, and so I do have that experience as well.
Thank you very much. Will the clerk please provide ballots? If you don't have does everyone have a ballot? Okay, if you would please mark your ballots and fold them in half so that they can't be seen, and pass them down, and we will pass them to the clerk.
Yeah, but we're going to be done before that.
I know, that sounds the same.
Yeah. Oh, you gotta break the vote.
Okay.
It's tough duty.
Christie's going to be going December 10th. That's the night we're going to have the public hearing on the sale of the parkland. And we need full council, right? Yeah. So we're supposed to have a public hearing.
I believe that both candidates would make excellent mayor pro tems. You've both shown good work in this council. Ms. Hoppy has been elected mayor pro tem. Congratulations.
I think the procedure requires you to take a motion then to approve the, at least the packet requires that you take a motion.
Okay, so I will take a motion to elect Ms. Hoppy as the mayor pro tem.
So moved.
Second.
All right, first, I need a motion.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please poll the council?
No. Motion carries 8-0.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Dahl. That concludes the agenda, or the numbered agenda. We will now go to City Manager's Matters. Mr. Goff.
5 minutes, right? Before we adjourn. Quickly, just a reminder we'd like to invite everybody out to the holiday lighting ceremony this Saturday evening or afternoon from 3 to 6:30 p.m. On the green in front of Stevens Elementary. So please come out for that. I think the weather's going to be okay, hopefully. As was discussed a little bit this evening, as you know, we have a couple vacancies in some elected positions. The District 1 seat, Monica Duran, her resignation is December 31st, right? City Charter requires that City Council appoint somebody within 30 days of resignation. We've discussed the process at a former study or previous study session, so we'll get an announcement out. We've created a new application form which we'll put on the website and get to you all this week so that we can start getting that information out to accept applications. Does that work for everybody? Then also for the city treasurer, that his resignation date is January 7th. There is no time frame on when city council has to appoint that position, but we can also get that application process started also, unless I hear differently. Mr. Matthews.
Since those while you're at making application forms, I assume that they will be applicable to either of those two parties, since they're both elected officials?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
I just want to ask a question, and I know we've talked about it before. I know it's going to be very important to make sure both these positions are well covered. Of course, one by and the process that's outlined. I guess I would ask that we maybe talk a little bit more about the treasurer position at a study session, if that would, people would agree. I think that Mr. Ditullio has put us in a great position, and I'm just wondering if that is something that, based off of that, what 9 months of that position, if it's something that staff can backfill from that perspective. I know that a city treasurer isn't common, so I just didn't know from that perspective as far as from an elected position. So I just was wondering, and I'd hate to have an application out there and then have us go, oh, thanks for applying, but we're not filling it. So I'm just wondering, before we put that one on, if we could discuss it at a study session.
I would concur with that.
We can put it on December 3rd.
Is there concurrence on that? We have concurrence? Mr. Urban?
That's it. I was just.
Oh, is that concurrence? Okay, Mr. Goff?
All right, we'll start with the city council District
Okay.
1 position, and we'll discuss the treasurer position on December 3rd.
Anything else?
Nope.
Mr. Dahl?
If you want to go past 11, you take a motion. It takes 6 votes to go past 11, and I don't have any further reports, so it's kind of whether you want to take time after 11 to do council reports.
We will elected officials matters. Is there anyone who would like to offer anything? Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is for the city manager. Both Chrissy Davis and I received a call from several neighbors in the 4800 block of Wadsworth inquiring as to the current design of the I-7, or excuse me, of the Wadsworth widening project, and they would like to request a meeting to go over their concerns relative to that current design.
Yeah, we're, Christy, I think, has been emailing with staff, and I think we're going to have an internal meeting with you, maybe you, if you want to be involved too, first, and then see if we can schedule a neighborhood meeting. We've had numerous neighborhood meetings, but we can do another one.
Okay,
So we're working on some dates.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further business to come before the council? Then we will stand adjourned. Thank you.
We have no more